This is so weird because you're in my like sanctuary.
I've been here before.
All right, what did you want to talk about? Why are you here?
Yeah, why am I here? Why are we here in this little container?
I don't know. I'm serious. What were you like hoping that you wanted to draw out or work through or?
I felt that I've been feeling this more and more lately that the the podcasts that are out there, there's like it's somebody is always coming with a specific message because they are encouraged to come with a specific message. And I feel like that message is either tethered to something that's being sold or it's sort of the norm of the culture in the moment and it's like a little different angle of it. So what ends up happening is the conversations are the interviewer is there just like drawing out facts and information from the interviewee to embed and pad this argument of why this thing, approach to life, approach to business, approach to relationships is necessary. And that's it. And you don't feel like there's this sort of natural emerging discussion. The interviewee has like points that they want to discuss. The interviewer has a sheet of things that they're going to get through, and it's sort of, I know it because I've been in those situations that you know before you go into the interview essentially what's going to be covered or the structure and the format that the interview is going to take place with. So if there's nothing surprising for the two people involved in the conversation, then there's definitely nothing surprising for the person who's listening to it. So yeah, I was seeing that more and more, hence why I just don't engage in podcasts anymore. And that's why I was saying what's happening within the college ecosystem is this unbelievably rich, sincere, deep conversation. It's very hard for you to bring that to people just by doing it on your own, speaking to a camera. So it's worth almost not showcasing it, but
This is how it's done.
allowing it to emerge in a similar way
Interesting.
so that people can feel and understand and receive what that sort of engagement is like. Because I don't see it in many places.
I think it's going to be tricky for both you and I because we're like, how much is your contract for the podcast thing? Or not how much, like how long is it going to go?
Oh, I've
think?
committed to at least like 6 months.
Same.
And then see it out from there, yeah.
Yeah, I've committed to the exact same thing. And every time, I think, like what I mentioned before, every time there's like somebody presented or this is, well, what do you think about this? I've even noticed like in the podcast ecosystem, there's a certain way of doing it.
Doing what?
Doing the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
hey, how do you want to, is this a good guess? Is this not? And it's like this entire market is the podcast market or whatever. It's, at this point, it's just set up to, I guess, just be a platform for selling something, or I don't know, or just filling slots or whatever. So it'll be weird as we both, in our own individual ways, go on our podcast tours when we want to show up a certain way.
Yeah.
But the guest, the person hosting isn't used to that or something.
Totally.
So.
And I mean, I find it myself, I'm even feeling it in this moment because when you show up with somebody for a show, it's actually incredibly easy to just slot into a caricature of yourself.
Right.
And then that's what they get. And it sort of gets reinforced.
Right.
Whereas here, I'm like, I'm not gonna, I'll go wherever.
Right.
And it's actually a strange feeling for me because I'm sitting here in this moment filled with curiosity and anticipation of what will emerge out of this time of sitting across from each other.
I have no idea. What I dig though about you is like, every time we've hung out, it's just never there's never an end to the discussion. It's just like we can just talk forever.
Yeah,
So I've always valued that about you.
yeah, same as.
Yeah.
And also to receive the capacity to be like challenged on points. Challenged not in the sense of I think you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
This is the way it is, but challenged of can you tell me more? I actually see it from this way. This is my worldview.
Mm-hmm.
And it ends up allowing me to see it from different points. Whereas oftentimes the two ways that it can go is that like somebody comes right up against you to say, no, that's not it. Or the person you're in a discussion with can be quite passive, just like, wow, oh my God, that's amazing. You see it that way. And either both way don't really fulfill something new to emerge.
Right.
But if we can kind of like acknowledge that we both have a very subjective experience of this life that we both live, but yet we can find some sort of a common thread with each other, then we can kind of infuse that into each other, and it makes it all much more interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you plug into podcasts? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you watch? Do you plug into the content of other people that they put out there?
No. I've tried to recently, though. Now that I've got that sweet new ride, there's something wrong with the stereo system in it, where it is always hissing unless you play audio through it.
Oh,
I
interesting.
don't know if you noticed that when we were getting the cable. It's like this white noise. So I need to get it fixed. But because of that hiss, I couldn't like take it. And then I realized that once I play something, the hiss goes away, but of course it's replaced by like whatever it's going. So for me, it's like it's less annoying to listen to a podcast than it is a hiss. So literally just the past couple days that I've had the car, I re-engaged with like, what do people listen to basically? And of course there's music. But what I've been doing is just going on YouTube and Red or whatever, or YouTube Premium or whatever, and just listening to anything that I find interesting that's like a long form discussion or a debate or something. And then I'll just put it on audio only. And so I drove up to LA yesterday, all the way back Palm Springs and back. So I've already driven like 500 miles or something the past couple days. And got to get through some pretty good discussions. One was this guy, Max something, and Jordan Peterson. They were talking about diet, of course, and how his mother suffered from dementia, et cetera, et cetera. I found that really interesting. And then lots of Bishop Barron stuff, like just conversations that he's having with people.
Do they resonate with you?
Oh, for sure, yeah. But I did make an attempt to go like, where are the podcasts that people listen to, and like I want to listen to them, and I like simply I just couldn't. It was just too difficult for me. So
Why was that?
I think it's this thing that you're getting at, which is, and I can kind of sense the intention. It's like, why does this even exist? Because of all the people that I work with and stuff. It smells of, there's a certain intention behind this, whether it's like to monetize something, or it's got to be short and punchy, or I got to interview this person, this and this. It's like this, and to fill the content hamster wheel. I think a lot of these folks are like, they don't have a paid engagement or a service-based business or something like this. Like their work is their podcast.
Right.
And so they have like sponsors and so forth. So unfortunately, I just think they're on the content hamster wheel. And so I genuinely don't think there's much substance there. So I don't know. I'm like on the lookout for audiobooks though, is kind of my thing.
I've been diving into this moment that I think we're in more and more in the last week in particular, because of giving that talk yesterday on the age of wisdom, and really I approached it from so many different angles until I arrived at the space that I communicated it in. Something that I was looking at or seeing as a pattern over time was, I saw it as like the age of access, which was the time of the gatekeepers, the record labels, the core media companies, be it in newspapers or TV stations, universities, financial institutions. Their value was on the fact that they had these products and they were able to charge higher margins because you could get access to them. Same with like insurance companies, even travel agents. They had access to knowledge of like where to travel and visit other countries. So you would go to them to book your flights and your accommodation because there was no way to understand what was on the other side of the plane journey.
Right.
And then with the internet, all that sort of dissolves. And what we get is we move from institutions. So what's interesting, what's interesting is about in each of these ages, the equal and opposite is also true. So during the age of access, it was also a time of great restriction. That if you weren't able to get access, you felt very restricted to what was available. It was very much about institutions. It was very much about playing the role to get into the institution and get the benefits of having the access to it. Then with the internet, we transitioned into the age of information, which was about participation, which was about networks, which was about scale and reach, mass distribution, which also created the equal and opposite of the age of disinformation.
Yeah.
Or misinformation. And the value on that is that you had a tool, something that you could leverage to put out a message to reach a lot of people, information that they previously didn't have access to, which at the beginning was immensely helpful, like the excitement that was available when TED Talks came out.
Right.
The availability to plug into interests and worlds and to meet a community and to discuss things with them. But over time, I think it started to feel a very natural discomfort that's part of the human experience, which is it's very natural to feel unsure and uncertain throughout this lifetime, no matter what age you are. And it created this sort of synthetic engagement or relationship that this person knows me. The person who's on the other end of this podcast or on the other end of this video or on the other end of this tweet storm or on the other end of this Instagram video, they are relating to me. But it's a discourse. It's one to many.
Yeah.
And the person who's putting out the message, they're never getting you. They're only getting representation of you that comes through a data point,
Right.
which is to show the length of time of your engagement or how many more of people like you liked this thing, so therefore I will create more of that. So it warps the world of the person who creates and it warps the world of the person who receives because they're relating to somebody who can't relate to them. And then it also creates this sort of echo chamber of the person who's creating because they feel like they're having this direct engagement, but they're never getting to understand the real nuances that come through the actual interpersonal dynamic. Because I think when we meet in person, if you're not listening to me and you're just kind of going through your own world and discussing that, it will zap energy out of the interaction. So what's needed then is for us to plug into each other to fuel it with energy. Whereas online, I think if you actually bring that sense of true listening and empathy, it kind of sucks energy out of the engagement. Like if you see people on like a thread or a comment thread and they're like being so earnest and sincere with each other, like I totally understand where you're coming from and I see what you made the point of there and I see it as this. When you read that, you're like, oh, God, that's exhausting to read. It's almost easier to read some sort of like confrontational discussion, like, nah, you're wrong, I see it as this. He should have brought it this, she should have said this, I don't understand why she's seeing it this way. Almost like that fuels the whole communication flow with energy. These sort of like short, pithy, critical statements.
Yeah.
But in an in-person interaction, that doesn't happen at all. So we've kind of come to a tipping point of this age of information because it's created all of this noise and information which hasn't brought any clarity to life. It's just made it all the more confusing because there's all of these competing voices which are strengthened when they are competing with each other, when they actually choose not to understand each other. And with that, we come looking for some clarity, guidance, wisdom, which actually emerges much more, I think, through smaller groups of people interacting together to work towards a sort of shared effort and approach to life, which harks us back to old times that we can start to create in a digital space, which is why I think there's a need for more of these types of discussions.
Sure. Then how do you... I mean, the mass majority of people are not going to be creating stuff. They're going to be consuming stuff, right? So like, is it up to the creator to change how they show up? Or is it up to the consumer to pick how they consume?
I think it all happens together. I don't think it's really one side or the other. I think there's... McLuhan spoke about this, that when we take a technology and push it to a point of saturation or extreme, what we will do is we'll create something new by retrieving something from the past.
Yeah.
So we've sort of been fed some of these false promises that the more you can reach people, the more connection you'll feel.
Yeah.
The more access to information you can get, the better, but it just creates a lot more confusion and uncertainty. And the more efficient you can be, the more productive you'll be.
Right.
But like, that's totally got in the way of it.
Yeah. Second brain.
Totally, the second
notion
brain, or like all these automations and workflows, and then that becomes the job itself, is like moving through
keeping
these
that up.
sequences of automations and workflows. So then what we end up retrieving is the very basic analog simplicity of life prior, but we try and bring it through a kind of a modern expression of technology. And I think that actually seems to happen on both sides at the same time. The content creator is fatigued by trying to show up as this caricature of themselves. The audience eventually starts to become fatigued of receiving this kind of vapid, futile engagement. And then it's kind of happens in an unconscious way. It doesn't really happen that a lot of people come with conscious awareness and say, this is the new path. But it kind of comes through this state of exhaustion that we search for a new way of being. I think it's a little soon now, but I think we'll see it a lot in the next 18 months.
Yeah. I've noticed that, like, especially with younger people, like, I mean, like 15, 16 years old or whatever, 14, they're being discipled by their phones, basically. Whatever curated algorithm is giving them their thing. But I think that they are able to perceive somebody's genuine intent or disingenuous intent. I think, in other words, I think they can see why people are creating things because they've been trained to constantly consume and make judgments without the other person feeling them judging them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So they're actually, I mean, when you're in a conversation, like as you're speaking, you're also thinking about, oh, how am I being perceived, right?
Yeah.
But if this younger generation is just constantly consuming and developing a relationship with this person, they are not having their brain go through the rigmarole of how is this person that I'm watching perceiving me as I watch them. That's just so underdeveloped, right? So I think, in a sense, I think the younger people can probably intuit that caricature's intention more so than we could.
Right.
Because they're trained to judge them because they're not thinking about how they're being perceived.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, you got all these older, I guess we're old now, but like all these older people, if they choose to show up online in some way, they're basically not fooling anybody. In other words, I think it comes from what is your intention behind making this, being so crystal clear with that, but also realizing that the people watching you, the people that you think don't have much value in what you have to say or what they have to think about what you have to say, they most likely have a better judgment on your intentions than you do, even because they've trained themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know that I think that this like authenticity or whatever, showing up authentically, I think that's a very two-dimensional way to like solve that problem. But it I guess it like forces people who want to create spaces online to reckon with the fact that the younger generation coming up has been trained to perceive somebody's character through a screen, not like this. So do you draw those people into real life in person, or do you just show up differently? Like how do or do you show up differently for them online? How do you see that,
I
you
think
know?
it's pointing at the intent, right? That
Yeah.
like your intent will be seen before you may even be aware of it yourself.
Yeah.
Because like you see that so much in what's happening in the college
Yeah.
ecosystem, right? That somebody comes to you with an idea or a business, or well, it's not an idea, it's an evident offer, but
Yeah.
then they'll come with these problems that arise.
Yeah.
How often do you see it that it's either a misalignment with the intent or
Uh-huh.
not even aware of the genuine intent that they're going into the thing with?
I see what you mean. That's easier because I can interact with them,
Right.
you know? But I will say this, now that I think about it, like when folks bring a question or something to me and I'm like trying to interact with them, just getting the question out is difficult, right? So I can kind of read the intent there. But you're right. There is this like the question that they're bringing, I somehow can sense like, hmm, why are they bringing this? You know, like what's the intent for sure? But the dead giveaway of the intent always comes down to, would you take a look at my VSL, or would you take a look at my landing page, or would you take, in other words, would you take a look at my two-dimensionalized version of myself? And that is always the hot water and teabag thing, where it all. So it's like, okay, let's stop interacting and let's just see how you're presenting yourself. And then you know what? Now that I think about it, that's what's going on is based off of my interaction, my genuine interaction with you and the questions you're asking, what I think your intent is. Let's put that aside. Let's look at this marketing material that you've made, and it's so funny. Within 5 seconds, it's pause. You're coming from a place of fear. You're coming from a place of scarcity. The reason why you're making it, what was the intention behind this? What's going on? All the misalignment just comes to full fruition. It just boom. I see it all there. It does seem to be that how you show up in, I guess in this case, the marketing material, or when you decide to show up authentically, it's easier for me to see the misalignment because I get to interact with them. But I don't imagine it would be that easy if I just watched the marketing material without interacting with them.
Because you would think that that's them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, or like do what these young kids are doing, like just pass judgment,
Right.
but not actually connect, you know? So it's harder, I feel like.
I think this is something interesting to talk about, though, because if you can tell me if I'm getting this right, that what you're seeing, because I think this happens with a lot of people, once we go from the way we are in the real world,
Yeah.
in our physical bodies,
Yep.
our physical sense of ourselves, and then we make the effort to go through the medium of the digital space to put out this extension of ourselves, or this caricature of ourselves. Evidently, it's going to be a compressed version. It cannot be a replica of this.
Exactly.
So it's what happens in that passage of getting compressed
Yes. Oh,
that,
the translation process of
or
compressing yourself?
yeah, that if you're not really aware of how you're approaching it,
Yep.
all of these fears and insecurities
Yep.
will lead the way.
Yep.
And then you end up with this like really poor
Yeah.
representation of yourself
Right.
that and then you can feel this real disconnect between my business and who I am, my offer and who I am, how I present myself and who I am, or how I show up on a podcast and who I am, because maybe deep down we feel like the digital world can't actually hold the
That's
truth
what
of
it
who I
is.
am.
Yeah.
So therefore I have to play to its rules,
Yep.
which are more like a default tendency that people go to, which is, I don't know, like I said, sometimes
Yeah.
it's about arguing, or it's about not listening, or it's about feeding into the image, because it's a very image driven world. And what it ends up doing then is that we have all these followers, or we have all this engagement, but the person who's on the side of receiving the content feels empty, and the person who's on the side of the giving the
Yeah.
content feels empty, because neither side feel
Yeah.
like they are being seen and received.
Right.
And it's a very
Sad.
vapid feeling.
Yeah. I see what you mean now. Like I'm thinking of like the documents we have inside like the college ecosystem. There's like one thing in terms of VSL, it's like intention, like what's your intention behind this? I see what you mean now. It's I do think it's less of a problem with them though. I guess I tend to believe that yeah, maybe this container doesn't hold our full selves correctly. And so the process of translating ourselves to contextualize to this piece of material, we in a sense lose a dimension. You know, we become a two-dimensional version. I don't know. I don't necessarily think that's our fault. I guess I tend to believe that it's because that whatever you're making, it forces you to think two-dimensionally.
Yeah.
I think that person, especially the expert, especially the person of deep wisdom, as you said, I think they wish that they just didn't need to do it. I think people just saw them for who they were. They'd be able to see it. But I think the question that you're like trying to bring up is how can you bring those people into your world? But then I guess that brings up another question, which is you can't literally bring everybody into your world.
No, but
So how do you do that?
I was chatting with a friend Pat last week, and he's a guy back in Ireland. He has a relatively large following on social media. I think he has something like 85,000 followers on Instagram. And he's a multi-dimensional character who can offer many things. And he's done stuff with fitness in the past, he's done stuff with breath work, he's done stuff with trauma, loads of different things. But in it, he never felt like fully fulfilled or whole from what he was putting out there, from what he was doing. So he was getting things like the EY Entrepreneur of the Year award. He was getting acknowledged for lots of different accomplishments. People were seeing it and congratulating him on what he was doing. He was going out and giving like a one-day workshop, and people were very grateful for it, said it was fantastic. But inside of him, it didn't feel like it was really fulfilling, because it was just a version of him. It was a compressed version
Yeah.
of him. It was a little vignette of who he really was. And now he's doing something with a group of about 45 people. It runs for 6 months, and it's centered around breathwork, but he gets to bring in all the elements of himself into that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not him pre-recording content and putting out there. There is some of that, but mainly it's them showing up frequently on a call together. And he feels so much more fulfilled by that. He's making more money.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't feel like he needs to tap into these vignettes of himself anymore, because he feels received and seen by the people, because they're showing back to him feedback of great depth of what they're receiving from it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's coming through the digital plane in the way that he's interacting with all these people around the world, but it's done in a certain container where a lot of him, not totally all of him, but a lot of him can show up. Whereas in the other ways of sitting behind a camera and recording something, or thinking about structuring something that's going to be compelling and get engagement and get likes and virality, he loses himself in that, because he's thinking about the system. He's trying to adapt himself to the engagement system of the platform that he's on. And he'll get the rewards of the engagement, but he loses the thing in himself that he really wanted all along, which was this sense of connection and sharing something that was truly in his heart and that could reach beyond to somebody else, and that they could be impacted by it the way that he was. So it's an interesting one, I think, because we're being given these tools to reach people, and it does reach them, but we cannot reach out to them the way that we are capable and want to. And that's the sort of tension that we feel.
Oh, I see.
And that inability to do it is because if you're going to record and post something, or you're going to like timestamp a podcast that this is going to be 45 minutes long and we need to get all the juice and all the core nuggets out, what you end up doing is you end up just getting the surface level stuff.
Yeah.
And just constantly duplicating and multiplying more and more of that around the world. And you know inside of yourself that there's so much more to me, but I'm just putting out the surface level thing. I'm not going deeper into myself. I'm giving this to people. They think it's great, but I know that they could be going so much deeper and so much further. And it creates this mirage, and everybody feels this internal agitation about it.
So why not just show up the way you want to show up then?
I think there's a feeling that you're not allowed to.
I don't feel that.
You've never felt that?
I have felt that.
When did you feel that?
Probably when I was making ads for my old company, and I have to think about this actually. I guess I take that back. I do feel a sense that I always have to compress myself into an offer, a company. But if it's just making...
And you're good at it as well.
Oh, thanks.
You know, the hardest part is for people
That's
who
the
try to do
bummer.
it and they're not good at it.
Yeah.
And then they feel all this tension that
Right.
I can't do this.
True. But like, I do think that I'm happy to be wrong about this, but hope I'm not, is that I do think people are feeling more liberated to just do whatever they want and create whatever they want. And like, I actually think their intentions are shifting to, I truly believe that, especially a lot of the people we talk to, like us together, is like, if you could create an offer that's, how would you just like to show up as you are, authentically, with no barriers, and it's somehow translated into the technological ecosystem. All you have to do is show up. All you have to do is be yourself. You don't have to perform. You don't have to pretend. You just have to be you. And what if there's a way to set up a container where you just were that, and that it was captured, and it was, I think every single expert, especially, or somebody of wisdom would say, yeah, sign me up. So I don't think there's I don't like that idea of showing up that way. I actually like my caricature. I don't think they genuinely love to keep that up. I think their intention is they want to be the way that they want to be. I do think there is a problem with the technology, what it presents itself. So I don't necessarily think that it's, what did you say? It was, they feel like they have to. I don't know. I think there's people who are like, I don't feel like I have to, but so I'm just going to do it my way. But I think the issue that they run into is it's not working.
Right.
So now it becomes a matter of like pragmatism. Then what were you optimizing for? So now you're just creating for creating's sake, but now you got to pay your bills. I think it runs into that. It's more of a primal thing.
Right. And then we go to the most easiest, what we appear to be the easiest forms of persuasion to start doing business.
And for people
turn things
like
over.
you and me, it's like, oh, we just open our mouths and money comes in. But for people who...
Not at the beginning, though.
Of course, yeah. No, same, yeah.
Not at the beginning. It takes a while to get there.
Of course it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a journey for me massively over the last 10 months of letting go of all the information which served me well and made me money. Of all the frameworks and approaches and strategies and tactics. Because once I reached a certain point of comfort in my life, I found it very hard to actually pull from that well for more fuel and desire.
Right.
Because it served me to get above the breadline, and then from that point, it all felt like it. Then at that point, it felt like it didn't feed me. It required a huge amount of energy to get any gains. Because to speak more concretely or specifically, it was like I was offering something, but I was not offering myself. I was offering the Momentum Man.
The what I kept calling the Michelin Man.
The Michelin Man.
Yeah, the caricature. I do remember this. I think this is the first time. You probably remember this. We were in New York, and you offered to speak on some of the issues that you saw in your work with the people in my work, right? And you basically had everybody, figuratively speaking, in the palm of your hands in terms of describing the problem, right? I think you know where I'm going with this. And it's like, yes, you're clearly articulating these feelings that I have about my work and productivity and the things I dislike and things I like and my interaction with technology and myself, et cetera, et cetera. And then when it came time to prescribe, essentially even your prescription was reduced to some sort of
Do these 4 things.
do this, do that,
Yeah.
or don't do this and don't do that. And I think the energy of the room got sucked out because I think maybe you were feeling like, gosh, even these prescriptions of these problems that I'm feeling are still not enough to hold all of these things. So it's hard because when it comes time to articulating your essence and the problems that you're seeing in your work online, actually at a certain point becomes very easy. But when it comes time to take action, I think the thing you would suggest at this point is like the only container that can hold space for moving through these problems, it can't be reduced to these trademarked prescriptions. Maybe it's kind of what we're talking about at Bird Rock. It's more so like, how about the only call to action is you just come be with me for 5 days?
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're prescribing or seeing, or maybe that's a space?
Yeah, it sort of gets to that. Yeah.
You have a presence?
But to get there, I do feel as though it's important to be with a small group of people.
Yeah.
First, because
before you go,
I started out speaking to the corporate audience, who I didn't know. I just would be introduced to them, and I had to give a prescriptive thing for a general audience which I don't know.
Yep.
So I just had to go for some things that would generally work for everybody.
Yeah.
Which sort of points to the beginning of this conversation, which is when these sorts of containers of opportunities of learning and education, which are happening through podcasts and YouTube videos, they don't intimately know their audience.
Right.
So the things that they offer out are typically just general prescriptions.
Yes.
Which will have some sort of an effect for some people. Will never really get to the root of what wants to be explored.
That's the thing I have such difficulty with is like, I'm definitely in a mode of like just create and just put it. It like doesn't matter like how it. But I will say this: like I've been doing these like Sunday sermons on my channel, and my wife, like Megan's, like why do you do this? I'm like I go to so many churches and I just hate their sermons, and I just feel like I want to make my own, honestly. So I'm just gonna make my own so that when I sit in one and listen to the same text, I don't have to like feel like, oh, I wish they did this, this, and this. I can just do whatever I want. So it's a very selfish motive. Like that's why I'm creating. But her feedback is always, your audience, see, it's interesting you went that way because your audience this and this. And I kept going, wait, what audience? You know, like what audience? And so I guess my rage back is sort of like, here I am thinking I don't have an audience. I'm speaking to nobody in particular. I'm not contextualizing this message to anybody but myself. And I guess I'm alluding to a general population, I guess. But I can tell you this, dude. If there were people in front of me and I knew them all very intimately, you better believe that everything I'd be saying is more contextualized to them.
Right.
And that's the thing that I can't figure out and I'm struggling with. I honestly feel like the lack of context of who you're speaking to or who's listening to you is the block for most people who are trying to present something, to your point. But unfortunately, the algorithm curates your audience for you. So then you end up having to, everything that you make contextualize to your known audience.
In very general terms, right?
Always.
It's like general demographic brackets.
Exactly.
So it's your biases and your assumptions of what serves. And that's why
Right.
I think you end up with a monoculture then, like that there's a lot of there's a lot of homogeneity in today's day and age. I see it in like traveling around and you go to cafes and coffee shops and they all sort of like are of the same design. Especially
they
when they're
are.
into like a certain like, you know, approach to coffee. They all look the same because they're all coming from the same inspiration board on Pinterest and things like this. The clothing, you know, you can go to Barcelona, you can go to Dubai, you can go to LA, you could go to Medellin in Colombia, and guys and girls of certain ages are kind of going for similar looks, similar styles. So it creates this sort of global village. And that's a shame too as well, I think, because we need more diversity to like inspire us, that when we go to another place we're drawn by the inspiration of the differences that live there, instead of this sort of general theme or culture that spreads through the algorithm going everywhere.
Yes.
But there was something that I wanted to come back to that you said, which I was curious to ask you about, because when you go to these sermons and they're not being given the way that you feel like they could, they have that because they have the people in front of them. They have this same people showing up every week.
Yep.
What is it that they're not doing that you long for them to do?
For goodness sake, it's their only job. So they better be excellent at it. And if I, in my board shorts, can do this and prepare for 30 minutes and it be just as good, it really puts into question the speaking gift, I guess. So it's more so just a handling of the text that this is more of a me thing than it is a them thing. I just have a bee in my bonnet of how I think something should be presented, especially one that you hold to be extremely true. But here's the issue, is that I do sit in those pews and I get to know some of those individuals. And the feeling I have is that, especially back in New York, is that you've got somebody saying something to the same group of people every week, but they do not know what their ears are hearing, and they're not even contextualizing it for them. So I actually think contextualization of the truth is incredibly important. And if you're standing there giving a talk and you have the same people every week and you're not meeting with them and you're not contextualizing everything you say to them, then shame on you, right? Because it's like there's no excuse, essentially. And so I guess the struggle I feel is, you preacher or pastor person, do you even are you so, I guess, divorced from not only the world but even your own congregation that you don't even know how you're being perceived, and yet you have all of the resources right in front of you to contextualize everything you're saying to these people, but you live in such a recluse way that there's no way that you even care to contextualize it. Okay, if you were to show up to YouTube and do the same sermon, that person could probably get away with what they're doing. The struggle that I feel is that they do have an audience that they know and they get to meet and they get to listen to and dialogue with every week if they wanted to. And I think that the rub for me that I feel is that there's no care to do that. It's kind of like on our, like when we do our events here, like at the house, like I feel more comfortable not saying anything. I feel more comfortable going, what do you want to talk about? And that's a me thing, because I get to understand the context of the room,
Right.
and then adapt all of the things to, okay, this is what everybody's feeling and thinking. But it's much more difficult when I'm unable to contextualize the things I'm thinking and feeling. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, for sure.
I'm not saying that's the right way to do it, but
So in that sense, in what you're feeling, is it that they're They're speaking about a thing, a truth, something that's very important, something that needs to be understood, but maybe not fully acknowledging the lives being lived of the people in front of them.
Exactly. Like that it shows a lack of empathy and it shows a lack of care. But if there was empathy and care, which I actually think there's genuine, sincere empathy and care in their hearts, but there's such art and beauty in being able to contextualize these things to where they are. And I think that's what's so I actually think that's what's missing for this whole tech information age, wisdom age, all this stuff is it's all context. You don't know who you're speaking to. If only we could know who we're speaking to, of course we would contextualize what we're saying to them. That I do think that's what we're getting at here. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
And the faster the medium of communication, the more compressed and the less context there is. So you can
Right.
go all the way from, so once you leave like the physical space. So you
Yeah.
could kind of go all the way from writing a letter to somebody, which is such a beautiful thing. Both like the amount of intent that's required to write it and
Yeah, yeah.
the pace of reading it, and you
It's
can come
under
back to it
leveraged.
again
You
and
have to
again and again. Yeah.
yeah.
And then you like take that all the way down to Slack.
Yeah.
That's the spectrum as I see it.
Right.
Where what ends up being used and defaulted to are like emojis and GIFs as a way to convey a message or a feeling,
Or a reaction to it.
a reaction to it.
You're not even putting the emoji, you react and the emoji pops up in the side. Yeah. That's so funny.
And I was at a before I saw, or yeah, it was after I saw you last November, and I was going to this leadership retreat for a company. The head of the division, it was like 300 people over the course of 5 days. They had something like 29 initiatives, and they realized that they needed to focus and they needed to bring a lot more focus into how they went about, because they were merging two divisions together of the company. So there was so much, there were so many interesting things that I took from that week. But one thing was that at the end, the director of the two divisions asked me what my insights were, and without even thinking, I only kind of reflected on how it was probably being perceived afterwards. But I said, you have a culture that's similar to teenage dating. People are extremely willing to engage through texts and emojis.
Oh.
But when it comes to actually meet these people who they communicate to constantly throughout the day, I could see the awkwardness in the interactions. There was no pre-work being done online so that they could really sink in much deeper once they came offline.
Okay.
It was so incredibly surface in the types of communication that was happening amongst these teams, that when they came to meet offline, the progress was very slow, because now they were just starting to see through the cracks that were already there, that were always there, but they didn't have the lines of communication for it to open up. And I think that happens a lot nowadays in companies where, I mean, that's been kind of like central to my work for many years, which is that there's way too much time being spent in communication, and the communication is rapid, hyper fast, low context, which creates way more busy work. It loses a lot of clarity. There is no sense of a sort of collective approach.
Yeah.
It's a lot of individuals who are just sharing and agreeing or disagreeing or coming in with opinions and views. And it's very important to create space for that high context, slow communication. Yeah. And then once that base foundation is set, then you can engage in like the text and emojis, and things will, fly through. But you need to then make sure that there's time being given to that slow communication to take place as well.
Agreed. And why do you think, I have my idea of why this exists, but why do you think, what burden or need is placed on them where they feel they need to interact online in that hyper fast, no context to low context way? What's the driving?
I think it's a social driver. I think because
interesting.
I think because we want to, it's a driving force within us. It's an instinct. It's very hard to override through reasoning. We want to show and especially when you're your income and your family support is on
That's
the
what it
line,
is. Yeah.
then we want to show our value.
Yes.
And our value is displayed through things, because in a low context world you have very little options to show your value.
Right.
So you show it through things like the speed of response. You show it through things like doing the task is, or saying
And
yes
what you
to
do.
get the task done.
Yeah, right.
Because especially going back to that example, it was two divisions merged together. This was the first time that many of them who had been put on these teams together got to know each other. But even for people who've worked together for a long time, they don't see each other in person very often. So they're not really that aware of each other's character. They base the knowledge of each other's character around these very particular work scenarios, which happens through being on meetings together or being on Teams or Slack or email threads. And with that, we start building a construct or a map of who this person is and how they operate.
Right.
And then you're trying to keep yourself worthy within that space, because if you don't,
Yeah.
and you lose your job, your family is in struggle. So it is probably reinforced by this real
Right.
natural survival instinct.
So it presupposes that this communication style exists. It presupposes that the reason why we're all doing this is to drive revenue, improve my worth. Is that fair to say? Because
What do you mean by that? It presupposes.
like we can, I guess we can assume that. Well, I'm going to conduct myself in this way in work, very low context, hyper fast. I need to prove my value. I'm going to say yes to things. I'm not going to say no to things. I'm going to attach in my email attachments. There are going to be significant assets that I'm going to, this is my value. I can't. I'm busy. My stacked calendar. You're basically showing your boss or the people that your clients that I'm working. Therefore, I have meaning. Therefore, I have value. And then everybody who's in charge of that ecosystem, I guess energetically, we're working to drive revenue. We're working to build something. And then all of those people go home. I like to think that they don't interact with their friends or family that way.
Right.
So what's the main difference? It seems like this performance-based, P&L-based, productivity-based, I don't know, driver-based thing. And over here is a reprieve from that. You see what I mean? It does seem to be that like money or survival. Actually, I think in this world, you do all of these high context, low output things as a counterbalance. It's still survival.
Yeah.
You're surviving in both ways.
Yeah.
But I think I empathize. I think there's this like survival money thing that's at the heart of it. Like, do nonprofits exist like that, or?
Yes, but I also think a large part of it is because you can see this in just like a solopreneur as well.
Sure.
Which is this real sense of confusion of how to navigate this complex space.
Yeah.
So the way to move through it is to do more.
Yep. Fill up my space with stuff. Yeah.
Then like I'm unsure what's going to happen, so I'm going to launch a newsletter and a podcast or et cetera, because that seems to be the thing that's working. And I think the same thing happens in these organizations where there's not a lot of clarity about what the direction is.
Yes.
So they look to their competitors and they're doing this and they're doing that, and we want to make sure that we're in front or ahead of them, or that we're not missing out on market share to them, so we will also do this. So it's much more of the direction of life is informed of, and this is actually, I suppose, sort of like related to the Red Queen effect, which is this argument that even though we progress and evolve, there will never really be a case of an individual who will like evolve rapidly against everybody else,
Right.
because we're constantly racing forward, but we're all racing forward together in a similar pace. So in somehow we're racing forward, but we stay in the same spot.
Right.
Because we're just doing it to stay in line with the competition that's happening. And that seems to happen in corporate landscapes very much. You get some who get this like unique view, and they go and they trail a path, and then they're way ahead of everybody else. sort of like maybe like Nvidia is experiencing now.
Yeah.
But at some point, like people will catch up to them, and then somebody
Yeah.
will come in from a whole new angle with a whole new product line.
What a burden
Yeah,
to live by.
yeah, right.
Oh
But
my
I
goodness.
think a lot of individuals live by this too, because
Yeah.
they don't get the chance to rest in what they want truly for themselves or what they can truly offer and contribute. So therefore, the map that they're given is what's existing, what's happening in an existing way. Like there was a guy he's like a coach and a personal trainer in San Francisco, and he reached out to join Hara, and I had a call with him last week, and I was just trying to understand what he wanted, and he told me he wanted to scale. And I was like, okay, so what's needed there? And he's like, well, I'm pretty much maxed out on what I can do myself, so I'm thinking about getting a physical space in San Francisco. Can you imagine that? And
To scale.
to scale, and then I don't know what comes out of that. And he was working with a business coach who told him to build out a 5-year plan. And then I was asking him like more and more, like, is it, because that seemed to be the only path. I kept asking why. He's
Yeah,
like, 'cause
why
that's the only
scale?
thing.
Yeah.
And then we started digging in, and I started asking him a lot of questions. And then I asked him, is it growth you want? Like, do you actually want to feel internal growth, or is it scale that you're longing for? And he said, I don't want to scale at all, actually.
Yeah.
I don't want to hire anybody. I want to be free. I want to do it myself. I want growth. I feel like there's so much more in me, and I'm not getting at it. I'm only scratching the surface, and I want to tap into what I feel is there. And I was like, oh, so it's not even like financial growth per se. You feel like the financial growth will be a mirror and representation of the internal growth, but it's internal growth you want 100%.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to. Okay, great. So is it that you want to go deeper with people? Well, I don't know if I want to go deeper. Like, how can I go deeper? And then I was asking questions. Well, what are you to them? Are you just giving them exercise? Why is exercise important? Oh, no, it's not just exercise. My client called me last week, told me she was pregnant. She told me I was the second person she told. She wanted to tell me because of this, that, and the other. They see me as so much more than just like some trainer. And suddenly I could see his mind opening and
Yeah.
expanding, that actually underneath it all, what he was longing for was this deepening. But he was feeling that internally, that desire to deepen. But as he engaged online to see how business is conducted, it was a broadening that was constantly being recommended to him. So he mixed up the feeling with the kind of map that he was being given. And that was the effort and the energy that he was starting to put towards, okay, so how am I going to double revenue, and how am I going to afford this space? And you can just imagine the burden that he would be placed under.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that happens in a lot of ways, that desire to deepen that we innately feel inside, to go deeper into our craft, our mastery, our experience, our interaction and connection with others, gets warped by this question, how does it scale? Because that's driven by VCs who are only looking for multiples on their investment, so that they can put in the money, get it out within 8 years, make the company go public, and then they have got the return on their investment that they wanted. I was chatting with a friend who works within a VC in Amsterdam, and she said they're basically they're financial analysts. That's what's happening here. It's like looking at how can I maximize the value that's placed on this. How can I increase the valuation? Not how can I long-term improve the customer experience or go deeper into it. The founder is detached and removed from the true mission or purpose, because they're so hamstrung by the demands of the investors to get to that multiple. And then that language starts to enter into the collective ecosystem of business, which is that the ultimate
Yeah.
holy grail is scale.
To exit.
Yeah.
To leave.
Were you caught in that with math?
Yes. Are you kidding? Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a nightmare. Yeah. Every question and answer was growth or scale. That's why, and I need to get over this. That's why I'm so allergic to that word, because I have a negative experience with it.
Well, how is it negative? Because you grew the company and you were able to sell the company, yet it's negative. On all points, that should have been a positive thing.
Well, I mean, you know this. It's not growth for the sake of growth, scale for the sake of scale. Besides an exit, growth and scale as a metric for self-development or something, and you have external these external multiples or revenue numbers to somehow give me the validation that I am internally growing or scaling, that is not like, we weren't created to thrive under those circumstances. In other words, it's deeply against our nature to look for external, especially 0 and 1 metrics, to see if we have any self-worth or any sort of progress in our soul. And I think that's what I was feeling, is that I do see no correlation between my growth as a human being and our growth as a company. And there's this mantra that I believed, and I still believe this to a certain extent, where if business is the playground and there's scales and multiples and revenues, and you can't reach that, it forces you to become a different person in order to reach those things. So in that sense, there are these external prompts to sort of grow, and you grow when you reach those points, for sure. Like we were talking on our way to get that stupid cable. It's like there's, I see it all the day too. It's like all the time. We'll just charge what you're worth. It's always an internal thing.
Yeah.
Always, right?
Yeah.
So I do, yes, I don't balk at that idea at all. I do see this like external prompt, scale, growth as a way to grow internally. I do see that. But I think the thing you're getting at, and the thing why I kind of laughed at, like, no, it's not about that. It's because all that scale and multiple and growth always results in an exit. And I don't necessarily believe we were created to exit our work. And that doesn't mean I'll ever not exit again, or I regret that, or anything like this. But I guess it's a more spiritual problem that I felt, which is, I'll take this, I guess, in the biblical text form. Back in Genesis, it says like, the whole curse of man after man's falling. Everybody thinks that the curse is work. That like, if only we can go back to the garden where we don't have to work. But they were working before that stupid snake gave them the apple or whatever, right? So it's not that work is the curse, it's that your work is cursed. That's what it is. So I do think it goes back to that problem, which is why there's this need for, how is it cursed? Well, in my world, it was cursed by me thinking that internal growth happened through external revenue prompts. And at a certain point, you want to exit. And in this upside down world, the fallen world we live in, exiting work means you've exited the curse. You've exited the rat race. All these stupid books, that talk about this. You just have freedom. Yet there is no freedom. I do believe we were created to work, and we were to engage in it and go deeper in it. So scaling and growth and exiting, that whole mantra, if you just sell your soul to it, it presupposes that the entire mission of your work is to leave it, right? As opposed to go into it, right?
Or to sacrifice very large parts of yourself
Yeah.
for the accomplishment of this thing.
Yes, so you leave yourself at the table or gone at the door, right? And then you go in and...
Yeah, I have a good friend who's in his mid-50s now, and he started off on the journey of his business in his early 30s. It took him 20 years to really get it to a good place. Now it's publicly listed. But only now, in his mid-50s, is he able to give time and space to actually find love and connection and explore the possibility of starting a family, because he needed to prove... But you know what's so interesting is that when I asked him what drove him to go through this, like, because incredible hardships, again and again and again, so many moments where the company ran out of money because it needed a lot of funding to get off the ground. And he said he couldn't even ask himself why he was doing it, because it had no meaning.
Wow.
That if he really sat with it, he would have stopped and he would have collapsed. So he just, because he had committed to it, he needed to see it out to get to a point where it was able to sort of take care of itself, which it is now. And that was that was the path that he took.
Mm.
And what that does is that develops a very specific and narrow set of functions.
Yes.
And then leaves many other functions very underdeveloped, which can create a lot of pain later on in life. So
Right.
you end up getting this sense of fulfillment and satisfaction, no doubt, from the incredible hardship that's been moved through.
Yeah.
But yet there's an immense amount that feels empty. And that's the beauty of life, which is we all have our own choice to make
Yeah.
the decision that we want and how we move through it. So it's not to say that that is wrong. For his lived experience, maybe that was the path that was necessary.
Yeah.
But it's also worth sort of exposing it to show it for its truth and reality.
Yeah.
Which is that the merits that you get applauded for doing that are wonderful in how others will perceive you, but yet our own relationship and connection to ourselves can feel quite distant because I had to deny and avoid what any true exploration of what I felt, because if I did, I would lose all the energy to keep fighting and surviving just to keep this thing alive. And that's a story that's rarely told.
Yes. Okay, well, there's like a problem that jumps up in my mind is, okay, no to growth, no to scale. It's not necessarily wrong. What you really wanted was this other deeper thing, et cetera, right? This guy who had this publicly traded company, all this. Only now is he kind of reaping the benefits of what he wanted, which is freedom, blah, 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 all this stuff, right? Okay, well, then what's the right path? Well, let's shrink the vision a bit, not scale. Don't optimize for scaling, for growing, for exiting. Just enjoy the work a little bit more, this and this and this. Obviously, I don't think you'd agree to 100% of all that. That's a caricature of that prescription. But that is the perceived takeaway.
That's the way to go.
That's the way to go.
Push against it.
Yeah,
entirely.
well, just don't do that. Just do
Yeah.
this instead.
Yeah.
Which is basically it's the exact same thing, just two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Right?
It's good you bring this up, yeah, because it's far less about changing what is done. It's entirely about bringing more awareness to how it's being done, so that there's more space to there's more space to be involved in the journey of life. Because there's that passage of time to have actually welcomed in the other responsibilities of, say, a partner and family, could have meant that all things could have been received, actually. The journey, the challenge, the love, the affection, the connection, all those things actually could have come together by that time. But it's just a sort of, and I had that narrative in me. So, I mean, I say this because I connect to it very deeply. Like, before I met Ashlyn, I had the story in my mind that I didn't have the space to meet somebody until I reached some sort of level where I felt like there was an availability in me or space. It was really down to internal space. I felt as though I needed to feel like I had all of this overwhelming amount of space that then I could welcome in a partner, because I felt so consumed by the work that I was doing. But the very act of meeting her and having her in my life and living with her has completely elevated every aspect of my life. It's let me shed lots of protective layers. It's let me let go of probably many silly things that I did to fill space, to give my life meaning. I actually, before I met her, because it was around the time that I was in here in November, and it was after we spent that weekend together, I had a 2-hour call with a lady, Sarah, a friend, great friend as well, to help me make sense of the keynote speaking work that I was doing, how it could be better communicated. She basically interviewed me for 2 hours, asking me lots of questions, and then she was contextualizing my language to actually how I would then be able to communicate what I was doing. And we went through the whole thing, and then she said at the end, this is probably a little off the course of where I typically go, but I feel like it's an important question to ask. Do you have anybody in your life?
Yeah.
I said, I don't. She said, why not? I said, because I don't have space or time for it. And she said, well, I will always listen to what people are saying, but I will often listen even more deeply to what they are not saying. When I asked you the reasons or the drivers or the purpose of this work, you mentioned the word meaning 19 times, but you only say connection once. And I think what you really wanted to say was connection instead of meaning, because it's connection that gives life meaning. So I'd encourage you to take a step away from your work or work a little bit less and allow space for connection to come in. And the next day I flew through Santa Fe on my way back to New York and met Ashlyn.
There she is.
And there she is, and it changed everything. But it was the truth. It was the truth that actually I think if you really were to dig into it, there was many things that were in me that I felt as though I needed to prove myself to be worthy of love, that I needed to prove myself to show that I was worth my place here on this earth. I don't know where that comes from. Maybe that's quite a common thing, but it was feeling settled and loved and acknowledged, and to have a home with her that actually let go of a lot of those things, that I didn't have to keep actioning and efforting to prove my worth to myself. Most importantly, that's what I was proving it to. I seemed to have this doubt that I was worth myself, but I really wasn't aware of that until months after I met her, and I saw how much of a shift had come about.
Where do you think the need to get to a certain place in order to become worthy to accept not only time for somebody in your life to generate a good connection, but also the right person? Where did that presupposition of your life come from, do you think?
We've kind of spoken a bit about this, where we took different paths in life, I think, where I saw the things that I was naturally good at, and in many ways I chose to go down paths against them.
Right.
You did the opposite, where you sort of leaned into the things that you were good at from an early age and just honed them. I'm not sure. I mean, it's there to be explored. There was something that was always drawing me towards something that I possibly wanted to do but felt inadequate in doing, or unable to do it, or awkward at doing it. So I would work on, I would always seem to push my energy towards my weaknesses. And had sort of no curiosity really, or didn't fully appreciate or even receive any feedback on the things that were inherent to me that I was able to do. I downplayed them internally within me. And I don't know. I don't know where that comes from. It's shifted lately, and that's through many reflections from you, Joe, most recently Xander. But my days was it a huge shell. It took a long time for many different people, Ashlyn reflecting things to me, to really let go of that. Yeah. And I feel as though a lot has been let go, particularly since I met you. A lot has been let go of that. I think it was one of the first things that you asked me when we arrived, and you picked me up from the airport in San Diego in November. Why is it these things that you keep working on? And I think it was from that I mentioned that it was this sort of draw that I had towards my weaknesses. Sure. But yeah, I really don't know what it is.
Have you... Thanks for sharing that. I think that trying to make sense of why you focus on your weaknesses and optimizing maybe those weaknesses or exploring those weaknesses is is a way to progress in life. I feel like that's your version of scale, right? Can I say that? Is that fair to say?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe there's something there of there was I I really dislike the feeling of going into something or having to be in something and feeling very awkward in it
Yeah.
and therefore choosing to avoid it.
You disliked that.
I dislike, it's very natural to go into something and to feel awkward about it. But what I dislike is then that I block that part of life off because there's something that makes me feel that yeah, there's something that makes me feel that you know what it is, maybe, actually, if I were to really be sincere about it. I don't know if this is it, but it's something that comes to mind. The vast majority of men that I had in my life growing up were the image of the man not to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had no representation
Yeah.
of the man that I wanted to be. I had no figure, I had no representation. So therefore I went out trying to understand more and more of what it meant to be myself, which meant I had to lean into these uncharted parts of myself. I had to explore all these parts of myself to see who I really was within that. And that made that truly made life a lot less confusing. It built a very stable confidence in me because I had placed myself into so many different interactions, so many different industries, so many different interests, so many different paths pursued, so many different types of encounters with people, different countries. And yeah, in the end, I found a great stability in myself. But I actually think a lot of that is related to that. I had to find what it meant to transition from a boy to a man
Totally.
and find it out for myself through trial and error.
Yes.
I couldn't operate off a model that somebody else had given
Yep.
to me because when I saw them, they were never the person that I wanted to be.
Wow. Well, there you go. I find it that's so sincere, but I find it also very useful to draw attention to because of the lack of good models in my life growing up when I was a boy from men. Because of that, transitioning to from boy to man, how do you make that transition, right? Well, you've noticed that is the root of your exploration and maybe possible answers to why you explore things the way you do. Right? But in your language, it was very good. By the way, this whole entire conversation is about communication, I feel like. I really believe that.
Yeah?
Yeah, and we can come back to that. But the language that you use was because I didn't have that, I went out to find what was in. That's a very masculine thing to do.
Is it?
Yeah, because what is a more feminine thing to do? It's to go in
Right.
to then go out.
Right.
It's never to go out to go in,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So you were operating in a masculine energy, right? But it wasn't to fill a feminine side of you, I don't think. It was actually just, as you said, there was a wound there. And if there was a extremely, I don't know, respectable and honorable man in those stages of life that you could model after, then you would still go out, but it wouldn't be to find in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So either way you're going out.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah. And the feminine qualities I felt were quite developed in me from
Yeah,
growing up with a single mother
I
and my
bet.
sister, and really being attuned to how she was. And yeah, those qualities were definitely there. And she was an exemplar of how to treat a woman. I think, you know,
Yeah,
there was things that had to be, there was definitely a massive amount of work that had to happen through her passing, and like releasing my mother and releasing any attachments of the way I related my mother to the way I would relate to my partner or to
totally.
other women. There was a massive amount of work that had to happen there too,
I'm sure.
because I noticed how many unconscious things emerge from that. But definitely, it's a very good observation. It's something that I've never noticed until actually just having this conversation. That a lot of that work was to find the masculine qualities within myself,
Yeah, of
because
course.
for so many of the men that were around me, what I noticed and observed was that they were able to uphold sort of basic necessities
Yeah.
of the provider.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, some of them not at all, even that. Some not. They were able to uphold some, let's say 40% of the standard masculine traits, but underneath it there was just a boy. It was really deep down. It was a boy in a man's body,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they had the physique and all of that. But you could see that they were so unknown to even to themselves. They were so tender inside, and there was no capacity to even really acknowledge or work through that.
Which is possibly why you felt the need to get to a certain point in your work and in your experience to pass through that, I guess, that passage,
Mm-hmm.
because you felt like the only way to attract the partner and connection for my life is if I could be that provider, or I was ready.
Yeah,
Perhaps there was that was the only thing that was modeled that you kept,
yeah.
that fundamental belief.
And may I say that entrepreneurship was the path that allowed me to really
Sure.
truly expedite that journey and process, because
Yeah,
it brought all of my inadequacies, I would say, to light.
absolutely.
I had
Yeah.
to, there was nothing to hide behind. There was the stories internally of the things that I was frustrated by. There was the stories internally of the things that I would change, but the rubber rarely met the road,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I would be resourced by, I would get another paycheck. All I'd need to do, especially before I started, was going on my own, was make a few sales a month, and I had a certain, like, you know, level that I could maintain. But yeah, once you go out on your own, it's amazing. It's amazing what comes to light.
Mm-hmm.
And COVID was an extremely helpful time, because
Mm-hmm.
then when all social engagements ended and I was with myself,
Mm-hmm.
that was an even greater period of growth.
Mm-hmm.
Then another time I was dating a girl who lived or she was in New York, but her parents were in California or in San Diego. So I went to Turkey. You had to fly. You couldn't fly directly from Europe to the US at that time
Oh, right.
during
Right.
a part of the pandemic. So you'd have to leave Europe for 2 weeks
Yeah, right. I
to
remember that.
then do your quarantine, and then to come into the US. So I went to Turkey for 2 weeks. And that was a huge tipping point, because I was on my own and I realized, wow,
Mm-hmm.
this is how much I can relate to myself when I'm on my own and I'm here for these 2 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
And it was it was a very poor dynamic. It was a very poor relationship.
Uh-huh.
And that illuminated even more that I have to figure out what's going on here. So it's a blessing to go through those
Yeah.
moments, those awakenings and realizations that the what's happening internally I'm not connected to, or I'm not aware of, or I'm hiding from it. And
Yet you went out to find out what's in.
yeah,
So it's still, the intent is to find what's in, but when you were forced to go in to find in,
mm,
that's where it not fell apart, but that's where it felt very uncomfortable.
oh, hugely,
You're just stuck with yourself.
yeah. And that's where I think both elements are needed. Yeah,
Yeah.
you need to continue to go out to find what lives within, because it's a great way to put yourself in situations and scenarios which are extremely uncomfortable. Dancing was a great one for
Yeah,
me.
right.
Going in and feeling like this really awkward guy, everybody must be looking at me, and not actually being able to express myself. All I could do was like watch what other people were doing and start mirroring them, because that seemed to be the thing to do. But slowly over time realizing this capacity to actually feel comfortable in that space and to express myself, such a shift comes from that then, because it brings this sense of comfort in the body that whatever is called upon and as a way to move, I'll do it, and I'll be free and playful and enjoyable. And that's a wonderful test for different dynamics in life then, that as something comes in and you're being called to uphold yourself in a certain way, can you do it and feel comfortable in it? But then that's when there's external demands being placed on you, and can you respond to them? Can you find a center to respond to them, or a place of ease? But then it is a total different experience once you really shift your attention and awareness inward,
Absolutely.
and you start exploring
Absolutely.
what this landscape is like, and how much mess and clutter and confusion, and how disconnected it is. You know, it's a different thing. And then eventually what's internally starts to mirror what's externally, and yeah, it all threads together.
Which is why we see these very common things in some dude who works at Silicon Valley who wants to scale.
Right.
It, you're no better or less more aware than he might be. I think there's just the human heart attaches their worth and their exploration of who they are to these external prompts,
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, they end in such pain and turmoil, especially if you choose scale, because now you have so much pressure attached to an internal wound, honestly.
Yeah.
And that's at a certain point, that the burden of carrying that external pressure becomes 100 times worse than just dealing with the wound.
What do you feel was driving you when that was alive in you with mastering?
It's been enough time away from it to where I've only been able to bring any awareness to it. So it's very interesting that you bring this up, because you speak of these people who they're in their work and then they go away from their work, and at a certain threshold they become aware of what their work's like when they're away from it, right? It took me like literally years for me to even be aware of what was going on with me there, because when you're in it you can't be there's no space.
Sure.
There's no space.
Or there's no reference points, maybe, is another
That's
thing,
right.
that you don't have other reference points to see things
I,
from
I'm
approaching
just
that different
thrown in
place.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no context, there's no reference point. Again, there's no context.
Yeah.
It's actually very important, I think, to highlight this.
Yeah.
The lack of context and the appropriation of what you're experiencing and what you're saying and how you're influencing whatever you're in. Context certainly is the glue. I do believe that. But what was going on there? I fell victim to if I'm able to grow this and scale this and exit this and do all this stuff, I don't recommend this. I'm just saying I fell victim to this. That I wasn't even aware of it at the time. I can only draw awareness to it now. If I did that, then I would be equipped to believe that I was capable of doing that again in life. I sort of needed that experience to, I guess on a surface level, say that I had the experience. But again, in my genuine sincerity here, it's because of a lack of belief that I was capable of doing something like that. So it's almost like a proving that I'm capable, really. So I guess then, yeah, I had to ask the question, why do I not think I'm capable? oddly enough, it does go back to these lies that I chose to believe, or I choose to believe, or I think we all choose to believe, which is, I think for any man or boy, I think the deepest lie they can believe is that you're not capable. Because we want to, I'm turning this into a male-female thing, but um, as men, especially going from boyhood to manhood, we want to go out. That's how we do things. We we do not default to caving in.
Mm.
We want to make a name for ourselves. We want to go out. And there's pure ways of doing that I'm trying to explore now. How do you go out and bear fruit? To not just seek validation or not just heal some wound, but how do you go out and create and make a mess of things, right? Without it being fueled by these wounds and these validation metrics and all these things. And that's the thing I'm exploring. But I believe at the time I probably went out. My version of that might be going out to address the lie of I'm not capable of doing something like that, which ultimately comes down to I feel like I'm not capable of doing something like that because when I was a child, a young boy, I had a father, had to have a father who says I can do anything. There's no way that he ever said you can't do this, you can't do that. He was always you can do anything. Yet I think because of the split in my household there's no good time for your parents to split up,
Mm.
but at a time where it was the exact turning point from boy to man, basically 13, 14. There was a questioning of, can I do this on my own now? You see, if I'm being really sincere, it's can I capable now, just on my own? So that was my sort of start of, am I capable at this ripe young age? I do think an extra 4 or 5 years in the oven would have been better for me, as opposed to then. You see, being faced with that then. But I can pretty much say that moment in time probably dictated the little voice, the devil on my shoulder saying you're not capable, you're not capable, you're not, despite my father saying you're capable of everything.
Right.
Or my mother saying I believe in you with whatever you do. You can have the best father figure and mother figure, right? But if you're transitioning from boy to man, there needs to be that rite of passage of you are capable. And when you go out, it ought not be to stomp out the voice, oh, you're not capable. No, I believe it should come from a genuine security in yourself to say, I don't need to do any of this to know I'm capable. I'm just capable. And that's, I think, what we talk about in our work too. It's the difference between somebody who can charge a whole lot of money and not do too much to fulfill, and the person who can't, generally speaking, doesn't believe that they're worth it.
Yeah.
So then the question becomes, where does that worth coming from? How do you find that worth? Why aren't you worth it, right?
Mm.
I don't pretend to believe that I have all the answers to how to overcome those things. But to answer your question, it's the worst thing a boy can hear. Despite everybody saying you're capable, you're not capable. That's not something that you want to start believing.
But it's also incredible what it can do when you use that as fuel.
Correct.
Because so much externally can be accomplished on that
Externally.
basis. Yes.
Externally.
Yes.
So when you see these people that, yeah, start a company, grow it, sell, all this stuff, and I guess you can, in my tiny camp, you can put me in that tiny version of that. You go, oh, you're so excellent. How did you do this? You're so capable. It does give you, when you're so underdeveloped in that way, you compensate the other way, right? As you know, it does give you an aura of capabilities of, whoa, but to your point, it actually comes from that fuel of that wound or whatever that is. But who cares? Like, that's only moving about it externally.
Yeah.
So,
And inevitably, I'm curious, like, then when you sold it,
yeah,
I'm sure it didn't validate that you were capable. Like, I'm sure something internally
did
had to
the
happen.
opposite.
Yeah. So what happened then?
I didn't know what to do. And I had to, just like with you with COVID, I'm here in Turkey, I'm just with myself, right? Same. I didn't give myself the space during that time, the context, I was just thrown into it. Granted, I threw myself into it to where I didn't have any curiosity around why I was doing it. It's only now, 2 years later, that I could even have any awareness about any of this stuff. Ask me then, there's no way I could have known. I have no idea. So in that, the next day, and from that point forward, it was just giving myself space to figure out what happened. So I can tell you this, it certainly didn't validate I am capable. It kind of did the opposite. It's like,
Was this a
that was a
fluke?
fluke. I was just about to
Right?
say. I got lucky, or I don't know.
Because it's trying to evidence what's inside.
That's right.
It's constantly. It actually does nothing.
Nothing.
External markers do nothing. It's just trying to evidence, and it will warp everything just to evidence
Oh yeah.
the internal narrative.
But everybody, all the rest of the civilians go, "Oh, you have this great apartment. Whoa, that's nothing. It doesn't mean anything." So I don't know. I'm trying to re-engage with going out again, but this time,
Going out.
yes, that's right. Yeah, going. Ultimately, dude. Anytime, I think that anytime you go out, especially as a man, to go out to find in, right? That's all fine, right? Anytime you do that and that's your only way of finding yourself, right? And that's the intention. I don't think that lasts so very long. I think you can see a tremendous amount of relative success in a very short amount of time. Because what that'll give you is fuel for external success. But because it's ultimately trying to fill an internal need, it must be met with an internal work,
Yeah.
ultimately. So you're actually just you're delaying something that really needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally. And sometimes it's not like a business. Like
Yeah, sure.
I have a friend who does a lot of, he not so much anymore, but he does a lot of crazy endurance sports, endurance competitions. And I think that's his way of trying to prove that capability. And he has a group of friends,
Oh,
that,
sure.
a
Sure.
network, a community of guys that often take a similar approach to life. And he had a bar and restaurant, he still does, in Manhattan. And he was saying, like, running that is so much harder
Running a
than rowing
marathon.
across the Atlantic.
Yeah. Yeah.
He would row across the Atlantic anytime
Is this
instead
the
of.
guy that lost his udder?
Yes.
Or whatever?
Yeah,
Something like this.
yes, I think that's what it would
Or
be.
or whatever
The rudder.
The rudder. I pictured this guy who just like fell in. But you're talking about the rudder.
The rudder,
So
yeah,
he
because
was
it was set to a GPS, so
Oh.
it was like guiding them along, and then they just had to keep rowing. But yeah, it fell off, or it got disconnected at some way along the journey. But there's something in that too, where what that is that's a very it's interesting because it's an external pain. And that pain can happen through like exhaustion and fatigue and chaos and conflict in business. It can also happen through exhaustion, fatigue, and chaos and conflict in these long Ironman races or this like huge expeditions
Yeah.
where we come up against this very tangible and acute experience that we're going to force ourselves to go beyond to prove our capability. But yet, when it comes to turning inward and facing the pains and the wounds that live there, we would take any external
Yeah.
feat, any
Always.
external challenge,
Yeah.
any anything to go through rather than sit within that,
Yes.
because that is the major difference between them, which is that the internal stuff must be sat with. You must just see it and receive it and become aware of it. And almost just by that process, it will release itself.
Yeah.
So it's the process of not doing, but acknowledging. Whereas externally, you can be like dialed out, you know, all the pain is there and you're aware of it, but you can tap out of it. And you can still get to the finish line and you can get the gold medal, or you can accomplish the thing, or you can get the external marker. And internally, you just found a way to sort of disconnect, but just to keep going and to
Right.
find a way to keep going,
Right.
which I still believe is a very valid and helpful thing to tap into when it's needed.
Yeah.
I see
Sure.
nothing wrong with it.
Sure.
But if it becomes the only sort of pain that one is capable of moving through, it will create a lot of compensations down the line, because all small internal chaos, all small internal conflict will be avoided, and it will be therefore matched up against, we will introduce external pain and conflict in our life
Right.
to kind of subvert it and not have to deal with it.
Right. Isn't that amazing that we choose to do things like triathlons and these very difficult things
Yeah.
instead of doing that's probably a guy thing, but instead
A
of
lot of
doing the
women as
work.
well today, though.
Yeah.
You know, oh, big time, yeah, with Ironmans, and you know, like they're pretty insane in terms of running a marathon and over a 2 mile swim, and then I don't know, is it 110 miles of a cycle all in one session?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I've seen it in women that I see their pain underneath kind of their lives. I can just kind of usually see that in people. But the space is filled with more activities or like stuff for their kids, or I'm going to start this side project, or let's plan the next vacation. It turns into the household needs to seem busy,
Right.
you know? And I guess I see that as well as women who are in their careers for sure. But I think in the no extraordinary person, but just the ordinary mom even, it's just there's all this stuff as well. But it's
It can just get manifested in different ways.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's I think what's required is space for sure.
Right.
But it goes back to your thing with everybody's on Slack, you know, choosing their emoji to react to something and appear like they're busy. There's no context, there's no space. You're not rewarded for that. And so when you do put yourself in that environment, it feels unproductive. It feels like you're not moving forward.
Totally.
It feels like you're not working on yourself or on anything,
Yeah.
you know?
And therefore we feel like we're of no value or use.
Exactly, yeah.
I used to engage in that a lot, those sorts of races, of open water swimming races, triathlons, half marathons, anything that was grueling, anything that was hard. If a space or a period of time opened up, I would seek one of those things out to give me something to channel my energy towards.
I see.
And I went back to Ireland August of 2021, September of 2021, when my mum passed away, to take care of things at home and to sort it all out. And that was a tough period. That was like 8 months of, it was about 8 months until this happened, of being back there, being back in the place where I grew up, not really wanting to be there. Yeah, you just, you know, there's a lot that has to be confronted and acknowledged and accepted. And during that time, I couldn't seem to plug into this like drive myself on, these sort of internal things that I would say to myself, like I needed to push myself and put my body through pain to feel worthy, to feel alive. I couldn't muster up the energy to do it. I would go for small runs, I'd go for small swims in the sea, but I couldn't seem to go for anything of any great distance. And then, yeah, it must have been 6, 7, 8 months after being back, I called my friend and asked him to go for a hike on Sunday. I called him on a Friday. And he said, oh, I can't go for a hike because I've got this open water swim race. Will you come and join it? And I said, oh, I haven't swam any sort of a distance in months. I can't do that. He said, oh, you'll have no problem. He said, get the wetsuit and come down and we'll have a great time. So I said, okay, great. So I stayed at his house Saturday night. Sunday we wake up, the race didn't start until 3 o'clock. We go and we get breakfast, we go for a hike in the burn, and then I show up with my wetsuit on. And then when I show up, I'm suddenly confronted with shit.
Yeah.
I wasn't preparing or anticipating this. I have nothing to push against.
Yep.
I needed something to push against. I had
Yep.
nothing to push against.
Yep.
I was just there.
Yep.
So I get in the water. I even said I put myself in the elite group. I was like, oh, I can do this. I'll plug back into the way that I used to approach it. I'll go in with the elite group. And I get in the water, a few strokes in, and just like water in my eyes and my nose, and that's enough to stop me. And I stop and I look back to the beach where we left from, thinking, oh, it's so close. I could just swim back there and tap out. I never even really wanted to do this. I didn't even tell a story to myself about why it was important. I can just go back. The other town that we're swimming to, the scanner looks so far away. But I was like, no, I can't go back. So I'll call on the momentum man.
I am the momentum man. My trademarks.
He will take me to the destination.
I will summon him.
So in my head, I'm saying, oh, I'm the momentum
Tell
man.
that story.
I'm going to prove it. I'm going to prove that I'm the momentum man, and I'm going to get through this hardship because this is what I do. Nothing. It gave me absolutely nothing.
I can't imagine why it would.
No, but it did. But that's the funny thing.
It did back then.
Yeah, it did.
But after your mom passed and you weren't prepared.
No, it gave me nothing.
It gave you nothing.
Then I started thinking about like the people who are now swimming ahead of me in the elite group. I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to win amongst them. I'm going to catch up to them. Offered me nothing. I would say the story and I'd start stroking in the water again. And once again, just a bit of water in the nose and it would just knock me back. Then I called on my mum, the hardship that she went through the last 8 months of her life. I would go through the suffering and pain of this to prove that I don't know. What was the story I was trying to tell? That I would acknowledge her suffering and her pain?
Sure.
Didn't give me anything.
That didn't give you any fuel.
Didn't give me any fuel. Because I could tell how fake it was. And then I think the last thing, I tried to search back into the memory logs of people in my childhood who didn't believe in me.
Gosh, you're just going back every time.
Going back all the time, trying to prove people in my childhood who I could, that person didn't believe that I could do it, this, that, or the other. I'm going to do it in spite of them. Nothing. And then I remembered my mum used to sell these water products and she had a bottle at the bottom. It said love plus gratitude. And this just came into my mind. I hadn't thought of that in a long time. I just thought, you know what I'm going to do? With each stroke, I'm just going to say love and gratitude. Love and gratitude. I'd never done that with anything like that in my life before. The first few minutes were still just as tough, but somehow the water in my nose and the choppy waves, it started to have less and less and less of an effect. It started to feel less and less tough. I started to just release into it. Love and gratitude for, I don't know how long I was in the water for, but it was about 2.5 or 3 miles of a swim. And then I get to the end and I wished it could have kept going.
I believe it.
I was just like, this was so enjoyable. I even got all these terrible cramps on my quads and my hamstrings. I was just like shaking in the water and a jet ski came, got me, stretched my legs out. They said, we'll bring you back to shore. And I said, no. I want to get back in the water. Not out of even this sense of I have to prove something, but because it was genuinely enjoyable.
Yeah, right.
So just back into the stride of love and gratitude.
Wow.
And that changed a lot of things then. I had this idea that I wanted to do an Ironman. And then from that point, it's never interested me because I thought, I'm just calling on this old way of being, just this old way of needing struggle, stress, sacrificing as a way to think that, as a way to feel like that is a well-lived life.
Wow.
Yeah.
I believe every second of that.
Yeah.
I believe that.
It suddenly allowed this probably made me recognize that path won't take me any further. Therefore, I must turn inward, and it probably was a big turning point in welcoming more and more inward exploration.
All of these internal motivations, they can only get you so far.
Yeah.
But when you're placed in a familiar situation, which you've done a million times swimming, but the context has changed.
Yeah.
Your mother has died.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's been a while. You were in Turkey and this and this.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm the momentum man. I can do this.
I'll call on him.
Those old Saint Momentum Man, the canonized
Saint Momentous.
Yeah, he. I love these planes that like always fly over here. Those old frameworks that you keep calling back to. It's not that they were never resourceful. They were. What changed? The context. You changed,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So something else needed to be called upon. And I don't necessarily think it was the power of water that your mom used to say.
No,
It was love and gratitude. There was
yeah,
something in that,
definitely.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I remember that one thing that I often do is, um, as you were saying, love, gratitude. It reminded me of. I was going to say that's very, it's very like Eastern Orthodox of you.
Is it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's moving through the most difficult spaces in life and reducing your entire being and your entire practice to a few words that you breathe in and out. And that somehow gets you through it. As opposed to I need to do more, try more, all this stuff. There's a prayer you breathe in, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God. You breathe out, have mercy on me, a sinner. And that's the prayer. And they'll do that for days, literally. They'll do that for 5, 6, 7 days, and it's just that. And they'll say it in their head. It's all they need. Because what it does in their context is it rightfully puts them in their place. And while also elevating them to live in that chasm, right?
Mm,
You're calling upon the greatest being that's ever lived, the highest, right? Have mercy on me, a sinner. So now you're being humbled as you're
yeah.
saying it, and it's this gratitude, love, gratitude. What you're doing is you're channeling that same essence.
Yeah.
You
And you're
know
softening into it.
exactly. You
And
warm up to it.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I had something similar that happened in a silent retreat where a message that once again, it's amazing when these things arise from the past in the right moment, but in those 8 months of my mum's illness and caring for her, at times she would say, "You're my rock, Patrick." And oftentimes in these moments we just say, "Oh, thanks," we just, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it actually touches something much deeper that we don't recognize at the time. And then months later, being at a silent retreat that I found extremely difficult, and a voice that started to emerge at one point in it was, "Please don't leave me." Because ultimately I wanted to leave myself. I didn't want to be sitting in the seat. I didn't want to be
Yeah.
there with my eyes closed.
Yeah.
I wanted to get away from it. And there was that voice. And then at some point this voice emerged, "You're my rock." And that was a beautiful thing to notice, which was it sort of like rooted me into this sense of, when we see a loved one in pain and distress, even though we might feel there might be 10 or 50 things that are going on in our life at that moment that are important, we'll drop them all and we'll just say, "No, I'll be with you. I'll stay right here with you.
Yeah.
I'll just be present with you and care
Presence.
for you
Yep.
and offer you my presence, that I
That's
will be
it.
here."
Yep.
And that will sometimes be enough to soothe and calm
Always.
somebody, that
Yeah.
they'll get through the pain. And I recognized that I was unwilling to give that to myself.
Yes.
And
Yep.
that those messages then made me realize this is painful and distressing, what's being felt inside, but just give me your presence, just be here with me. And now what is that? Like, who is having that conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Please, you be here with me. Like, who are
Yeah.
the different parts there?
Right.
That's something to explore within yourself.
For sure.
But it was a beautiful reminder, and I think that's sort of also the connection of that message of love and gratitude and the mantra
Yes.
that you spoke about, where it's just softening into the experience, as opposed to, it points at the distinction between, when we try and keep bringing in these external hardships, oftentimes it's about an affront and about hardening the
Mm-hmm.
body, and that I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to push through it and I'm going to force through it, and that I have that capacity. And we can have so much strength and willpower in that vein,
Mm-hmm.
but then when it comes to just sitting and softening into something, we can be incredibly
We
weak.
can't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've extended this thread quite a bit, but it's an important one, I think.
I mean, it's all connected, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the late now comedian Norm Macdonald. He had a gambling problem, and I mean, there's great studies that show the people who have real gambling issues It's because they don't know how to bet on themselves.
Really?
So they have to bet on something else. So I think it shows up in many addictions. It shows up in many, it's always moving out, the external. How do you play chess? How do you approach the world? How do you do business? How do you conduct yourself with the other human beings? How do you speak on YouTube? How do you do all of this other stuff? Moving out, it's an unwillingness, at worst case scenario, it's an unwillingness to first move in and address the thing that you would rather not address. I'd rather run a triathlon than do this. I'd rather do that than, I'd rather gamble than bet on myself. I'd rather,
Yeah.
I'd rather do this extremely hard thing to strengthen myself and to prove myself, essentially build a callus over a wound, than just be present with myself. Give myself space to address it. There's like, I think it goes back to this caricature, these people who create the creators, or whatever you want to call them, the content creators, the people who interface with YouTube or create spaces for even good debate and dialogue, etc., or whatever, right? I don't think it's that far off to say that the struggle isn't just that you're unable to bring your depth to this two-dimensional world. I don't even think that scratches the surface. I think there's a deeper longing of bringing oneself to themselves. And if you actually sit in that, you wouldn't even know how to interface with the world, right? So I think people who are creating and putting stuff out there, I think there's immense power in first, I'd say, as you said before, it's first bring the group of people together, explore what's happening there, right? And have it be a safe place where you can go deeper. It's only from that you can even begin to start describing what's going on to the mass market, right? But the ultimate way of doing that is to sit with oneself first, right? To become of any substance or any value to yourself, right? You can't rely on these tropes and frameworks. I mean, give me a break. Meditation every day is not going to get through this, right?
No.
It's beginning to, because you're allowing space, but sometimes it takes a year, sometimes it takes a decade to give yourself enough space,
Yeah, and I think it's not just space, it's often like letting go or releasing
Yeah.
things, releasing attachments,
Yeah,
releasing
the
blocks,
attachments, yeah.
And then there's depending on the life that you've lived and the way you've been.
Yeah.
The example you gave about Norm Macdonald there also makes me think about something that I heard you mention on a call not too long ago about basic needs and establishing
Yeah.
one's basic needs, that
Sure.
those who are extremely violent,
Yes, they're unable to
they're unable to
communicate.
communicate their basic
Yes,
needs.
so they act out. Yes.
Because that
Yes.
tension builds and accumulates, and then nobody's seeing me, I have these needs but I can't articulate them and they're not being met.
Correct.
And then out emerges
So violence.
Yeah.
It's why you say, what was the word you said 19 times?
Meaning.
It's why you said meaning instead of connection.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the entire through line of this is actually communication.
Right.
That's the issue at hand, because if our tongues are able to, from the the outworking of what we can say and how connected that is to what we're feeling and thinking, if only there was no block there, if only we were that in tune and we could articulate these things truthfully and beautifully and accurately, right, then there wouldn't be this need to side hustle your way through life or take it on or 10x your life. Well, and all these stupid do 100 push-ups to believe that you can do something. It's violence. I think that if, as you said, it most of it's awareness. Just, are you even aware of this? Once you're aware of it, sit with it and let it just, it does the work.
It takes care of itself.
It takes care of everything.
Yeah.
Now, imagine if you could take the next step and clearly communicate that, not only to yourself, but to others. How incredibly healing that would be for everybody involved. How much impact you'd have, you know? I think I do think that the communication world, that how we communicate, it reduces violence, as I've noticed, right? It reduces violence. It allows us to be more in tune with our basic needs. It moves us from a state of survival to abundance. And you see it in children. They literally can't communicate their feelings, so they have to act up.
Yeah,
We do the same.
yeah. And particularly for those, I think, who feel the most.
Yeah. Oh, if they have big hearts,
Yeah.
it's so difficult.
I saw this with two kids. I was in Ireland last year, and I ended up going to a school, a Steiner school, and spending probably like 90 minutes with these kids. They were like 6, 7, 8.
You're great with kids, by the way.
I love
You're
kids.
amazing with my son.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to learn from them,
Of
because
course.
there's a lot of purity there.
Yep.
And the masks and the personas haven't been created yet, so there's not too much distance between us and them.
They'd be great YouTubers.
Some of them are. Their parents put them
I'm
on
sure
the spot,
they are. Oh, no.
They spot the talent and they say, let's get you behind the camera.
They're authentic.
We're going to brand you and we'll get you some deals and that'll pay for your college. But there was about 25, 30 kids in the class, and I was doing these games with them to bring them into more awareness of the body.
Yeah.
And ultimately, actually, I was trying to create some agitation in their system.
Mm-hmm.
We did this game where they have to like switch their thumb like
don't
this.
even get me started with
that. So your index finger is out and your thumb is up, and then you have to switch it all like in one.
Remember when you did this to me and I just tried to hack it?
Yeah.
It showed me a lot about myself.
Yeah, everything.
Everything in life is hacking it.
And then there was many different games, but it was very interesting to see that there was two boys in particular that they could only sustain each practice, each little thing I fed them for maybe a second and a half.
Well, because they're on their phones the other times during the day? How come?
Because then they would just start going blah, or they would start disrupting the other kids, or
they couldn't focus on it.
They couldn't stay with it. Now one teacher that was there, she kept threatening them that if they didn't stop, they would, I don't know what the threat was, but there was some sort of a consequence of a punishment if they didn't be still. I actually gave a lot of my attention to them because the task was pretty clear. The other teachers that were there were able to oversee their students. So I asked the two boys, because they were in different groups, to come together, and just so I could chat with them with a few other boys. So I'd say, can you do this? And you try it. And they'd try it once again for about a second or 2 seconds. And then they would start flailing or dropping to the ground or making noises. And I said, what are you feeling when you do this? I don't like it. Well, what don't you like? I don't like it. I don't want to do it. It's boring. It's boring. Why is it boring? Because I don't like it. What are you feeling? I don't know. Where are you feeling it? Well, tell me, where are you feeling it? I can't remember. Okay, well, let's just try it again. If you're feeling anything anywhere, tell me where you're feeling it. I'm feeling it here. I'm feeling it here. What are you feeling? It's not a nice feeling. It's not a nice feeling. But what is it? It's messy. It's messy. What does it look like? It's like knots. It's like it's messy and it's knotty. And I said, okay, great. I said, how does that feel? I don't like it. Once again, they kept saying this, I don't like it, but where they could actually start to articulate more and more and more what it is. I said, okay, I feel it too, but maybe we'll just go really slowly and we'll start bringing that knot up. Are you feeling it now? A little bit. And then I said, can we go a little faster? Are you feeling more? Yeah, I'm feeling more. Okay, let's slow down. We started bringing it in. And suddenly the boys started to be able to move through the practices, and they started to actually be present with them. And calmness started to emerge from it. Because what I saw in them was they were the kids who would most easily, when brought to the doctor, be diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah.
But what's happening is that their internal experience is so alive.
Yeah.
And they're feeling so much. And maybe in their development, the capacity to self-regulate is a bit slower to come on board, or maybe their sensitivity is heightened. But all that's being judged is the external representation of what's being seen. And there's no curiosity or inquiry into what's happening inside. And as soon as there is questioning of what does it feel like, what's happening in there, what do you want, what do you need, they start to be able to articulate their basic needs or their internal feelings. And then these reactive, impulsive behaviors that come outside start to come offline. They start to reduce and mute.
Yeah, they're less violent.
They're less violent.
They can communicate
But
it.
the more that we come at a child and threaten them to
Right,
punish them
right.
to stop doing this, the more we're neglecting the basic needs that they
Exactly.
have, the more extreme scenarios of violence
The
will
outbreak,
emerge.
yeah.
And the same is true in adults.
Absolutely.
And I see it with a tremendous amount of people, whether it be porn or a lot of time spent on social media or any spare moment plugging into a podcast and listening to it or watching a YouTube video, or it could be food or sweets or any sort of vice that is an extreme sensory experience, which then takes me away from what I'm feeling inside. That's all it's doing. It's the desire to do that is because I'm feeling something and I want to mute it with a more extreme sensory experience, which will like overwhelm it for a few moments, but it will raise its head again. And the greatest shame of all of that is the amount of shame and guilt and judgment that the individual will place upon themselves for doing that behavior, when what they have never had a chance to be aware of is that it's the feeling in their body that's creating that. And nobody has ever asked them how they felt. And that can happen throughout a lifetime. And we could become better at creating longer spans of time where we bottle up these feelings and then it all comes out.
Gosh, but it's such a two-edged sword though, man, because those who can communicate very well, they choose a different path, which is I will communicate my way around all of this.
Ah, yes. Yes,
As
very
opposed,
true too.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
hide behind my words.
And reasoning.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a friend he's a friend of a friend. I know him, but I haven't spoken to him in quite a while. But I was with my very good friend a couple of weeks ago who was best friends with him. He told me he's in a very toxic relationship at the moment. The girl that he's dating is a therapist. And there's definitely toxicity on both sides. A lot of emotional manipulation.
But
the thing which I find most interesting is there will be huge emotional turmoil that happens between him and her, and all the things that he feels and that she says to him. And then within 30, 40 minutes, she will come back and will be able to say, I'm so sorry I said this. I was coming from this place. This is why I did it. I felt like this. So she's incredibly well versed at explaining, because she's able to connect with it after the fact of her emotions and her emotional state after all the chaos has unfolded. But in the present moment of the heat of the emotional engagement, there's no space for that. That isn't there. And I was with him, I was living in New York when they first started dating, and he was expressing to me that this was difficult, but he felt that she would overcome these blow-ups because she obviously had a lot of awareness because she was able to communicate it afterwards. But it's only persisted and gotten worse. So it's that difference between, just like you were talking about, being a great communicator and being able to really well communicate why I do the things I do, but never being able to engage internally about why I do them in the first place and what, rears their head.
Yes, I hate to two-dimensionalize this.
Yeah, but you will.
But here we go. It's having such wisdom and essence in your business and your offer and the things you can provide. When it comes time to what's going on here, it's like, give me a second to observe this. Well, we need 20 creatives for YouTube, like now. Well, I don't know what's going on. You need like weeks and months to like even just understand what in the world you're doing. And then you finally formulate something that is, I guess, a representation, but it was a representation of what it was 2 months ago. And in these static info product worlds, it's 2 years ago.
Right.
It's the same VSL running for 4 years. It's working. Yeah, but you've moved. You've gone this way. And so why aren't you able to recreate marketing materials as you're moving? It's because I can't communicate. I don't know how to communicate right now on the front lines of what I'm doing. Because right here, it's messy. It's problematic. I don't know what's going on here. And I can't show that. I need time to have it settle so I can draw awareness. I can start trademarking it, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll come back to it and I'll button up what's going on here. You know what I'm saying?
Do you
It's
see that in people when you draw them to say you need a new VSL? You
10
need,
times out of 10.
yeah,
Yes, it's why can't people do that? Not because they don't want to. They don't know how to communicate what's going on there. Because either they don't know how to communicate, or they're so close to the work that there's not enough space to stop and realize what's going on and then communicate it. You see, so for your therapist friend, it's getting worse, right? Well, what's improving? Well, given enough time and enough sophistication and enough awareness to what the problem is, she will always come back and clearly and beautifully communicate what her intentions were, what went wrong. But in that moment, what's the difference? It's just the time. And she's unable to be in that stressful environment. I'm sure she's a great gal. I have no idea who this person is, but she's unable to be in the present moment, listen to her feelings, and then do that same song and dance.
right,
For her, her kryptonite is time.
yeah,
But I think that's the entry point for everybody is time, space. It's the greatest low-hanging fruit. Just give yourself time and space, to just so you can communicate what happened and what you're going through, right?
But then when you're working with people and it's important for them to put it out now, like taking it into the
Why is it
two-dimensional business.
important to put it out now? It comes back to that stupid P&L that we were talking about, right?
Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt, but that's
yeah,
I go, why now? Right?
yeah.
So you have a choice.
Well, but I'm thinking of one example of one fella where you've been trying to encourage him to, like, I don't know where he is in this journey, but like to make a new VSL.
We both like immediately know who we're talking about, okay?
And like in an example of that where that's taking time, how are you trying to bring him in to the articulation of what's happening in the present moment?
That's different than but I gotta make one now,
Okay, I understand.
right?
Yeah, yeah. The I gotta make one now is because of this idea of I need to do it to survive.
Basic
I need to
needs.
do it to meet my basic needs to make a sale. If I don't have it, nobody will understand what this is, and there will be no
It's
purchase.
intrinsically tied because if a child has basic needs, basic feelings, and they don't get it, and they're unable to, more importantly, if they're unable to communicate that to those who can give that to him, he'll freak out.
Yeah,
Okay? We have these very sophisticated ways of doing this in business, which is my rent's coming up. Same thing. In order for me to fulfill that burden, I need to clearly articulate my basic needs, which is my rent's coming up. But I can't do that to my clients. I can't say, the reason why you should join my program is because in 14 days I have a rent payment and you're going to help fill that. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But that's the least violent way to sell is to communicate your basic needs. And then they'll say, oh, well, okay. Now that I know your clear intentions, we can have an honest discussion about this. But because those basic needs are there and you literally in business can't communicate that. Why in the world would you get on a sales call and say in 14 days I have to pay rent and you're going to help me pay that? Right? I actually think you have to reduce this to a very childlike way of seeing it because we're all just kids, but very sophisticated. And yeah, it's intrinsically tied. Well, because I can't communicate my basic needs, I'm going to show up this way in a very weird way. And that's where the tension is. Now, let's just extrapolate that out to the coldest audience on the planet. And they're not even in your sales funnel. They're just people. Again, the context, I don't know who I'm talking to. Imagine having those basic needs and saying, I'm going to make a YouTube video to fill these basic needs. I don't know who I'm talking to. Of course you're going to project and make some weird two-dimensional version of yourself. Not because it's very difficult to talk to a screen, because deep down you have these basic needs. And you don't know who you're talking to. And not only that, but you can't explicitly ask them to fulfill those basic needs. Not only that, you have to communicate your worth and value And this thing that is basically telling you that you're not valuable. You have 14 days. It's communicating. It's a you're not capable. It's that devil on your shoulder. No, I am. I am capable. Capable. And so you communicate, and the thing that you're communicating is this thing you built a year ago. And so it's all discombobulated, basically. That's, I think, what I sense. And that's the struggle, is you see that on a survival metric, but you also have the person who's wrapped themselves into their basic need, the belief that their basic need is that they need to sell this company by the end of the year. If I don't, then I'm nobody. You've essentially articulated your way up the communication chain to hide from the wounds that you're dealing with, to say, I have to do this in order to just be a person, to have my basic needs fulfilled, to pay my 16 mortgages, whatever it may be. So now the sophistication of the articulation has to become more complex. It has to become more, it's more high stakes. And they put themselves in that stressful environment. So how do they optimize? Well, they start liking things on Slack, and there's no space for anything. Come on, let's do this, right? So yeah, I see it all over the place, for sure. And I'm trying to find a way in which these entrepreneurs especially can question this, but I need it now. I understand I need space, give myself space, I get it, to communicate what's going on. You mentioned the fellow about the VSL. Yes, there's appropriate space. Yes, that needs to be worked through, address it at its own time. But there's this big urgency. I need to do it now. But, okay, that's your version of being thrown into the Atlantic Ocean and going, I'm in the middle of this. So you call upon your past frameworks to get through it. It's not happening.
It's so true.
You see what I mean?
It's so true.
There's another resource there that we all have that actually does get us through the now quickly. Not only quickly, but with effortless experience. Just ease. It just flows with excellence. But we have to drop these things that we keep summoning. The momentum man, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's my mom, it's a trial, all this stuff. There's a deeper resource there where you can't articulate this. You can't communicate your basic needs now. You don't know the context. You don't know any of these. These are high pressured environments, right? I question why now. Fine. Let's say you need to do something now. Fine. Okay? Although I would encourage that individual to remove any now language, because it's a symptom of a deeper problem. But fine, let's do it now, okay? Call upon a deeper resource instead of your old frameworks that got you there. Love, gratitude, love, gratitude. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner. It's these things, whatever they may be. They don't have to be those things. But every person of any depth or any wisdom or any business success certainly has that. And that's the choice. Do you want to address it now or after you sell your company? With a lot of pain and baggage and underdeveloped skills, et cetera, I don't know if I'm making any sense.
You are.
Does this
absolutely
answer your question?
And I think it's worth connecting this to the qualities that you're, because I'm curious about this. I'm curious about is this the way I want to frame it? You can let me know if this resonates with you. The qualities that you're intentionally and actively trying to cultivate within yourself as you grow college. And how they are distinctly different to what served you when you did mastering. Because I remember us chatting and you saying that you were at one stage sort of torn because you had a restlessness to really just grow this, because you knew how to pour gasoline on it in the way that you did with mastering. But yet you were trying to kind of, hold that, acknowledge it, but not engage with it in that way.
Yes. I'm in, was it the Atlantic or Pacific or Indian Ocean or something?
The Atlantic.
Atlantic, okay.
Yeah.
Where was this? In Florida or something?
No, in Clare in the west of Ireland.
Oh, like the other side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, the other side of the Atlantic, yeah.
Jeez. Ireland's come up like, what, 4 or 5 times?
I mean, it would.
Yeah, I would. I'm in the Atlantic Ocean right now, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all of the old ways of doing life, business, or more importantly, conducting myself in that are proving to be, well, if I do it that way, then I would need to compartmentalize and shrink not only myself but the business to fit into the metrics of success and the methods of success, right? I am not going to do that, okay? That's not an option.
But have you tried it?
Yes,
What have you tried that hasn't worked?
it's worked. It just reduces me and the vision of the business.
Can you tell me more about that? 'Cause I
Sure.
think that's worth discussing.
Sure. I'd be happy to. Although I do feel a little bit like that kid. Like, it hurts. I don't want to. I'll go slowly. Yes. Well, with mastering, the the thing that was special about that and is special about that is it started from 10,000 hours of doing one thing in one particular way, almost in a oh my goodness, it's pretty freaky, like how much time I spent optimizing this one way of doing something, you know. I don't know if expertise is the right way to put it. It's but the right combination of art and science was there, and it was repeated, and it grew in its own analog world, not in these leveraged info product worlds, right? I mean, real, in my version, real, substantial, old school business where you get a client somehow, you sell that potential prospect or client to work with you, and then you service them through a service-based business.
Mm-hmm.
That's very under-leveraged, generally speaking, given our modern context of how we do business, right? I thought that was pretty slow, okay? And then I think, well, what's the way to speed this up? How do I scale? Well, what's the bottleneck? Well, I can master a song in like 8 minutes. So I have 40 hours a week, you know. Cool. Why don't I utilize the marketing levers up top and fix the selling process into a fixed way that convinces the transformation is going to happen in a short amount of time, so that they just pay and I flood my inbox with tracks. Okay, and that's what I did basically. So, okay, this is all conceptual. I think it's more important to talk about it more principle and conceptual basis, right? That was an outside-in approach. Again, going out to go in. That was an outside-in approach at addressing the expertise. So let's scale the leverage with the marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so paid advertising, right? Google SEO, YouTube channel, all that stuff, right?
To draw more people in, to do more.
To do more, yeah. So I fixed the bottleneck. Everything's optimized, right? To fix the bottleneck of I need to work more. So I drove that, and then I fixed the sales part to a demonstration video, right? Communicating the value and the need, to a call that would close them on the spot, that would then bring them to me to where I could work on the music and just get the stuff, and then, you know, and then scale, growth. How do I keep doing this, right? Well, how about the sales side? So now I'm moving closer. How about the sales? How about we do paid advertising, organic, all this stuff? But the sales cycle is optimized. So now we have direct messaging, we have email, a lot of automation, CRMs, et cetera, et cetera. It kind of sells itself. Fulfillment stays the same. I'm going to do the work, you know?
And were you architecting this yourself the whole way through? Or
Yes.
were you pulling people in to kind of bring in their frameworks and their approaches?
I wasn't bringing anybody in to bring in their frameworks and approaches, but I was bringing people in to support my efforts in the decisions I was making. I could not have done it myself.
And to handle some of the operational things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm the worst operator on the planet.
Right.
So I'm glad you see that. I affirm that in you, Blake. So I can only market so much. I can only sell so much. Let's fill the calendar with doing the work. And then it got to the place where it was the 20 to 40 hour a week thing of I'm doing the work. Well, where's the other levers you can pull? So then it started going inside out, which is, well, it takes me 8 to 12 minutes to master one song in order to deliver the transformation that they need. Okay? The first move was, how about I hire more individuals so that we can service more people? And that's exactly what I did. Hired a team of engineers. So I replicated myself by, well, we can master 3 songs in 8 minutes. So there's more leverage there. Okay, more growth, more scale, more optimization, you'll start to see a pattern of this outside in, inside out thing that I'm addressing much differently now. The massive scale that really blew things up was marketing, selling, fulfilling. Taking that fulfillment and going, how do we deliver the outcome, which is a mastered song that they paid for? How do we deliver that outcome to where I don't need to work? Essentially was what it was. And I could only focus on marketing and selling. I had to redefine what the metric of success was for the service. So instead of saying, oh, you get a mastered song, I philosophized it. I articulated my way around it. I got really curious about what are the deep longings and pains and needs of this particular client. And I was able to do it in such a low stakes environment. That is, dude, somebody sends you a track, you master it, you send it back to them. It's pretty simple. There's no transformation. But my weird brain was able to take something very simple and make it very complex and communicate the basic needs of that client to go, you don't just want a mastered song. You want to recreate the sound you have in your head.
Yes, I want that.
Right? Don't you want that?
I want that.
And that's actually what they want. It's very legitimate.
Right.
Okay? But I elevated myself from a service provider to I can give them what they want.
Yeah.
That's more than a service. And granted, that is way more powerful than a service, to actually give them the sound that they have in their, just like that. Well, hold on. The only way to actually get that is if you do it, not me. If only you had my brain and my expertise and my abilities, you'd be able to do it. Why don't I take what I do, this process that I have with these engineers, and condense it down to curriculum? And once you buy the curriculum, 8 minutes, also with uploading it to WeTransfer, and then it pops into your inbox and you listen, okay, maybe it's an 8-hour process of transformation. Turns into 8 months. So the burden moved from me to them to go, once you say yes, you buy, boom, money's made, and it's 10 times more. Instead of $100, it's like $3,000 to $4,000. It's a lot more than 10 times, right? It's like boom, it's a lot. Great, that's where all the leverage is. But where's the work gonna have to go? Well, it actually goes back on the client. What you really want is to replace me. So I had to communicate the way that you really need to feel these needs being met, these basic needs, isn't for just rely on me. You can do this. So then it became an empowering thing. You can do this. I ought not do it. The only reason I exist is because you don't know how to do what I do, but what you want is to just get the sound you have in your head. If I was in your head, then it would just be amazing, right? We could just work together. So I had a choice. Do I have to get in their freaking head? No. They just need to understand what I'm doing, and they can just run with it. Curriculum, right? 3, 4, that, and now it's like 700-800 or something, and it's a lot more than just mastering. It's a whole academy, but that fixed fulfillment mechanism, okay, caused me to go, once somebody says yes to this, instead of $100 going and 3,000 goes, and instead of me doing the work, I don't do anything. It just is done. So obviously my gut says, well, you don't need all the engineers. You don't even need you. There's just this thing. You've moved from a service to a product, and it's your brain, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what do I do now? Well, let's deploy the same marketing, the same sales, and optimize that and just get as many people into this as possible. I mean, that's where tons of money can be made. Imagine spending $30,000 a month to fix it all and dial it all down, selling to spit out 300,000 or 100,000 a month, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now the outward in was fixed. Now I'm going inside out. Fix the fulfillment. Well, how do I fix the sales? More compelling sales copy, a team of people to sell. Not a team of people to fulfill, but a team of people to sell. Well, how do you fix this? Well, a team of people to market. More stuff, more copy, all that stuff. So this
Organic content.
exactly, yeah.
Events.
Lower
Partnerships.
customer acquisition costs by doing organic content. So let's produce more content to lower our costs, that whole thing. And so it's moving out, in, and it's just that whole move. And I look at that as actually a pretty basic way to symbolize how we go out to find ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
This sales cycle and the fulfillment cycle can also be such. It's first you start with the marketing, selling, fulfillment, and then so I mean,
And close to the client.
absolutely.
Servicing them.
Yep.
Mastering the craft and
As much as
doing it
possible.
well,
Yep.
dialing it in, and then later on you get to actually go from the inside out to make that change.
Exactly.
Internally.
Right. Now, prima facie, you look at that and go, brilliant. Just do the same thing, but with more expensive stuff. And instead of selling a get sound you have in your head, you sell this idea that you can be an expert at your craft and make millions of dollars and this, and like the ROI is going to be huge. But all these stories that I tell myself, right? Plus, I have this validation of I sold this thing. Oh boy, I can milk that, right? Granted, I haven't really milked that, but the temptation was, well, let's just do the exact same thing, but in this container over here. So you want examples? Okay, let's fix the fulfillment as soon as possible. Let's create curriculum. I've done this. I know how this goes. Fix fulfillment. Let's run ads. Let's do all this stuff, right? What I found to be the thing that why I'm in the Atlantic Ocean is because the context changed. For me, I was doing that because we just discussed it, right? Because there's the reason why I was doing that is the whisper, you're not capable. Okay? I spent 2 years working through that. So the only reason one reason why that was successful is because the fuel was you're not capable.
Mm.
Now I know I'm capable. Not because I did that, but for deeper reasons. So why in the world would I show up here and say I'm the momentum man? Or I'm doing this because I want to prove that I'm capable? It's a different driver. It's a different context. It's a different everything, right? So all that exists are the frameworks. But the reality is the frameworks aren't that genius. It's not that crazy to conceive that you can take what you want in your service-based business and put it into curriculum. It's not that ridiculous to imagine that you can fix your sales cycle into one call. It's not that ridiculous that you can pour money on. It's actually, there's no brilliance there. I think the brilliance was I was fueled by this, you're not capable. That's not brilliant. It's playing off of a wound. So as I go into here, I think, all the magic's in the framework. All of it is. I've done it. So you start doing it and going, this isn't working. Okay, is it the macro environment's changed? Maybe, Are you really an expert at this? Maybe, I don't know all this. But if you keep asking why, we're back at it. Am I capable at this? And then I realized, wait, I am. I totally am capable. This is ridiculous. And then I started seeing pathways of, well, now that I know I'm capable and I don't need these things, I can actually just do whatever I want now, right? And so new ways of marketing, new ways of selling, new ways of fulfilling started to emerge. And what I found was I didn't see any resources around me to give me any help to explore these things. Is this make
Yeah,
sense?
absolutely.
So this is profoundly close to me. I think if I were to apply the same frameworks and a little bit of the same fuel, I'd have the same business mastering, maybe optimize 30% more. That's about it. But now I have to completely ditch frameworks. I have to completely ditch all of that stuff and listen to my new fuel, because I am capable, right? I understand the value. I understand my worth. And I'm not going out to seek in. I'm now in, you see?
Mm.
Now I can go out. And now it becomes a mission. Now it becomes something of more significance. I have the luxury to not think that scale is the thing to optimize for. You
Because
see what I
you've
mean?
passed through that and you've seen it, and yeah,
I've seen how little it can provide.
it offers no allure.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I do mourn people who are still kind of caught in that loop.
yeah,
I have a sense of, I guess, mission or purpose to get people out of it. But I do come from a place of privilege to say, hey, give yourself space. Don't worry about money, blah, 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 blah. It's very insensitive for me to speak about it that way. I do empathize greatly with that when people are in these loops. I do want to provide ways, tangible, practical, the atomic habits, ways of meeting them where they're at, just to give some reprieve, right? Just for a short period of time,
yeah,
and then hopefully moving into a space of one of presence,
yeah.
and only experts I think can do that. If there's no expertise, if there's no wisdom, if there's no depth, then I actually think there are better resources for you than me.
Right. Because in that case, then if maybe a framework, if the
It
thing that
could
you
be
want to get
helpful.
is just to grow a business, a framework can be helpful.
Absolutely helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Whereas if you have the expertise, actually being given, I almost feel as though
It's like permission or
that's the
something.
word I was going to
Yeah.
say. I feel as though that's something that you've cultivated within college, which seems so simple, but it opens so many possibilities. Because if you turn to the business books, or if you turn to blog posts about how to approach business in a certain way, or the frameworks to sell or to market, you end up doing exactly what you saw was the mishap between you trying to, and you're doing it for yourself. You're taking something that worked really well at mastering and you're trying to take it to college, and it doesn't fit because the context is different, or it will mute its potential.
Yes.
People are actually trying to take other frameworks from other people and other businesses that they have no idea where the genesis came from of what they emerged from,
Yes, or even the intention of the founder of it.
even the intention, and then they
Yeah,
try to
right.
place it on themselves, and then it feels very cumbersome and awkward, and the name of the game is just to try to actually adapt your business to then fit the framework.
Exactly.
And then maybe you gain the success of money, but you end up feeling like the very thing that you wanted to create is very off center from what it wanted to
Absolutely.
become.
Absolutely.
But within that, there seems to be very little permission to draw from your own wisdom and experience of
Yes.
life to find the way.
Amen. Yes.
And I think that's the big thing that has been a huge eye opener for me,
Yeah.
since working with you, which was to recognize that there is a tremendous amount that I can draw from once I know how to access it.
Absolutely. Within, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But
From reflecting on prior decisions that I made where
yeah.
somebody told me that this was the path, and then I said, no, 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 this is actually how I want to go about it.
Right.
What was the deviating factor there? What was I connecting to
Yes.
where I knew what I wanted and I wasn't going to do, and it proved to serve me
Yes.
much more than taking just the prescription that somebody else was going to serve. And we will often neglect those moments and fail to draw on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, that's a huge thing that I've seen in others. And so what ends up happening then is if you have a beautiful ecosystem of individual people with businesses where it's an incredibly collaborative space
Yeah,
because we can also draw on each other's insights and how
exactly.
we're approaching, as
Exactly.
opposed to compete to try and do the very best
Yes.
with this one single approach.
Oh my goodness. It's like you're talking dirty to me. Oh my goodness. It's because if you fix the way of marketing, selling, and fulfilling into this is the model, this is the way, it worked for me, it can work for you, and you start doing it and you start changing the fulfillment to go, here's some new insights for the model, everybody. You're basically just a software, just operating system updating, and everybody kind of fixes themselves to it. It leaves you, your expertise, well, basically it assumes you have no wisdom, expertise, or any of that stuff. It assumes that. It bolts you down to pick a niche
Right.
and then apply the framework and money. But if you have this wisdom and so forth, it feels like you're just being just pushed into this little box, and it feels so new because it feels actually so two-dimensional. But what I think the thing you're getting at is if you remove that, we're all fixing ourselves to this idea or this model or anything. We're actually just bringing ourselves and our different domains and our different expertise. You're right. Yes, we have similar business, but the main thing we have in common is we conduct ourselves in business through entrepreneurship, and we have some fixed fulfillment mechanisms and levers we can pull to navigate these spaces. Fine, but really the common theme is our wisdom and expertise in whatever we're doing. So as you go deeper into your thing, you're not punished in the group. You see, whereas no, 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 stop,
Yeah.
come back and drink from the well of model,
Yeah,
right?
depriving people of the curiosity that they can tap into.
Yes,
Yeah.
when
Instead,
really
it's like conformity, conform to this
conformity.
way.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
monoculture. It's the
Yeah.
coffee.
Yeah.
It's the house-made Chipotle.
Yeah.
When you go to these cool boutique restaurants, everybody's doing it.
Yeah. Or the lavender latte.
Oh yeah, love it with oat milk.
Yeah.
It you can go deeper and go. Here's what I'm finding, not in the model that we all know, but here's what I'm finding in my wisdom and my expertise. And because it's interdisciplinary, you have your mentors and experts and the people that you draw from. And because it's multidimensional with the expertise, the main thing in common is the expert brain. It's the wisdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to live my life going deeper into your work. That's your journey.
Mm.
But I certainly can gain wisdom from how you go deeper into it. And you're not going to do my thing. So now we're rewarded for going deeper into what we're doing. We just need to draw our awareness to they're finding something in that. And I can seek to understand how they're operating themselves in their expertise. And that becomes infinitely more resourceful to what I'm doing, as opposed to how do we all get this model to be optimized?
Right.
You know what I mean?
And if I may say, then linking it back to where we started with this, then what becomes extremely helpful in what we share with each other is the way that we think through things.
Yeah.
So it's our
How
thought
we think about it.
process as opposed to our processes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
from there, and the only way that we can actually present our thought processes is to be questioned on them.
Yes.
It's not to pre-plan
Curious,
out
yeah.
kind of this is my 4-step formula for it, but rather to get on a call with a few people.
Yeah, right.
What's up? What are you working through? Well, actually, I would approach it like this. It's very contextualized.
It so is. Again, that word keeps coming up.
And I think of a friend that I have who, so there's Jamie, and then there's another friend who I won't mention him. He's a great guy, but he might end up seeing this. He does things with systems and operations for.
And it's not Jamie.
It's not Jamie.
Okay.
For businesses, but he has a framework. I think it's called something like the 6 Ps, and he will just plug the framework into businesses.
Yeah.
And they have to try to mold themselves around his framework and his
Right.
approach. And he spends a ton of time marketing, communicating the value of the 6 Ps. And I mean, he's doing all right, but like nowhere near as much value and across as many industries as Jamie is.
Right. Yes.
Jamie, the primary thing of value, I think, in spending time with Jamie and observing him, it's about his thought processes. And then he's somewhat I would say, process or system agnostic in a way,
Sure.
that whatever is the right move for you, and sometimes the right move is no process.
That's what he says. The best process is no process.
Yeah, which is an amazing thing, you know, and it's really therefore about finding out like what is it that you need at this time. So therefore, and then how do you think about it? How do you think about his thought process about running ads, about hiring freelancers, about setting systems and processes in the team? And therefore, once you understand the intent behind it and the way to think through it, and when it's the time to do it, then you can use this platform or this platform or this platform.
Yeah.
Whereas my other friend, it's like the 6Ps and Notion.
Yeah.
You know, it's like very, very locked there. And
Yeah.
where did it emerge from? It emerged from somebody actually doing the internal work, but almost too early.
Yes.
They went in
Yes.
before they had the time to go out. So it would be better to spend more time going out and just saying, I have these qualities. I've been an incredible operator in many different businesses for 10 years. I want to help you with your operational things, or people are coming to you and asking.
doing the work.
And I will find a way just to engage and help you through the problems. And then from there, I will start to recognize that there are patterns and there are
Yeah.
things that are emerging.
Yeah.
And from there, I can start to channel that into some sort of fulfillment,
Yes.
as opposed to trying to think, what's going on here in the market? Okay, people need help with their processes. I'm going to come up with some pithy statement that's going to be something that I can sell and pitch, and
Yes.
boom.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
often, I think, the way that people go.
Absolutely.
And then you become trapped because you've encased yourself within this brand, this identity. This is what I do, and I just have to I'm not really willing or able to see you where you're at, because I just want to find that moment where it seems like there's a little bit of alignment with the 6Ps, and I'm going to draw you in.
Yeah.
And it ends up wasting a lot of energy because you can't meet people with where they're
You
at.
waste energy.
Yeah.
But you think that you're not, because you're fixing everything with leverage, with technology.
Right.
Yeah, it's such a bummer. And I think the ultimate leverage, I think you brought this up at Bird Rock, which I'm going to have to do now, is you have to bring the right people together and slow down time a little bit and go deeper
Quite a
with
bit.
them. Quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
Yeah, I think you were suggesting 5 days.
5 days.
5-day silent retreats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a big longing for that.
Yeah, I think so. Because anybody who's really on this path feels something that needs to be acknowledged.
They don't know what to say about it, though. They just feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the language that is being offered to them of what that feeling is really much more of a materialistic and egocentric expression of
Always.
the feeling inside.
Yeah.
That if you can, you know, earn this much, have this much, grow this much, passive income, etc., etc., it can take many different forms. But really, it goes back to what you spoke about, the work. That the work is not something to be escaped from, but it's about finding an expression of it that feels like it brings all of the elements of you into it.
Yeah.
For example, I
Yeah.
was at dinner last night. I'm probably late for the one that I have this evening.
Oh my goodness, you have to go. Oh, you're so late.
I'm so late.
It's 6:10.
Oh.
If I can read my watch correctly.
Well, we're gonna have.
I
to
don't
wrap
wear this
up.
for time. I wear it for status and vanity. It's 6:08.
Well, the guy I was sitting with at dinner, he's the CEO of this company, Arcadia, that I spoke at their conference.
Yeah.
And he's an incredible guy. I mean, one of the most interesting characters I've met in a long time. A track and field athlete and a football player in high school. Competitive in crossword tournaments. A huge lover of the arts. Massive appreciation for beauty. Was noticing the gemstones that Ashlyn was wearing and able to tell her about them more than she knew about them herself. Has written improv, had a great character who was a porn star called Rex Manhood. Has been to every corner of this country as a settlement consultant and helping people. Had a love to be in the arts and to be an actor when he was younger. But in fact, as the CEO of this company that offers structured settlements, which is so far from that world,
Yep.
he has not been deprived by not taking the path of being an actor because in fact he's managed to bring all of these gifts into this role and they're all present there. He does not hide his appreciation for beauty and the arts. He and equally is able to hold his desire to develop the industry that he's within and to grow the company, to inspire people, to lead them on a vision, to bring in better technology and better systems and processes. It was just incredible to see how all the facets of his being are present in the role that he has. And I think that's what so many people are longing for, this sense
Yeah.
that the work that I do, I'm not simply doing it to sustain myself,
Yeah.
to maintain survival. And then once those basic needs are met, I can go out and give myself a few hours a week to explore all the uncharted domains of myself. But in fact, that they are all being brought into this way of being, this way
Right.
of approaching life, which is allowed to be present in the work that I do with the people that I serve, in the relationships that I have, in the way that I'm with my family, and that it's not about this work-life balance, but it's much more of an integration and alignment, and that there's all expressions of me are being explored and developed across all domains, instead
Okay.
of this sense of there being buckets.
Well, okay, when is he finding that because he is able to make his work a place where he can be a full extension of himself in its fullest form, or he's getting that need filled outside of work? You know
He's
what I mean?
exploring those things outside of work and then he's bringing them into work.
Okay.
So he's going and he's doing improv and he's acting
And he's integrating it into
and
his
he's
work.
going and he's going to museums and he's going to crossword competitions. But yet he's bringing that into work. He's bringing insights from that into work. He's bringing discussions and dialogues around that into work. And they're not something that he hides behind or that he separates from himself.
Okay,
And you
so
can feel that in his energy
yeah,
when you're with him, that the conversation is fantastic and the way that he thinks through things is very interesting because he's drawing on these different ways of being, and it brings him, and he's, as a person, he has a magnetic quality. You're drawn to him because he is clearly very in his life.
yeah.
And it's a full expression of him.
So does he find that, or how does he find his, when he brings these into the work? That, I mean, certainly he would feel like work can't hold him because he's so dynamic. So certainly he has to leave something at the door, or at least it's lost in translation, or it's outside the scope or something.
I just don't get that sense. Of course, he's not waxing lyrical about the arts, but
That's something I would do, I guess.
but like the company was rebranded,
Oh, okay.
and
I see.
he drew from that in
I see
wanting
what
to
you mean.
rename the
Okay.
company.
I see what you mean.
The meeting started. I went in to check in on it yesterday. The first time I've ever seen this. There was a live band playing the Beach Boys when we walked in the morning to get everybody ready and
Cool.
up for the day. You know, you walk in usually and it's just this cold AC filled room and everybody's going to sit down at these round tables. But in we walk in and the Beach Boys are playing, and they were like, "Oh, that's Brad's edition," and he's pulling from that. He's not afraid to pull from that. Like, you know,
I
that
see what you mean.
this is what people need. This is what I want to offer them.
How
This is this
cool.
kind of space that I want to create.
Right.
And yes, I just think that's part of the deeper longing, is to be able to like feel like those parts of myself are not being fragmented and
Okay.
isolated, but yet I'm able to bring them all in and believe that they will be well served in this space.
Oh my goodness. The thing that I need to then really address is, because I lived in this fixed way of the fixed models of leverage in business. That is, you fix the fulfillment mechanism, you fix the sales, you fix the marketing. It's all this tiny little lever, you know, or this tiny little point in your business that pulls all the levers. If I were to do something like that, which I think I kind of am doing, but if I were to really do it, it would break all the leverage on, like, well, that means I can't fix the fulfillment. That means I need to be more dynamic with the marketing, which means I can't fix it into a process. And so it slows down everything. And that's the struggle that I feel like I'm going to face if I do that. You see what I mean?
Why is that?
Why is that a struggle? Or
Why do you think it would start to break things? Or maybe that's not the most interesting question there. I'm more curious about I imagine I'm probably going to frame this question more as like an assumption
That's
to see
fine.
if you agree with it or not.
You're getting the golden hour in your face, by the
I
way.
sure am. The the I assume that the driver within you for mastering was growth. So therefore everything, the decisions orbited around that.
And the only
Was
way to grow was based off of this fixed everything model.
yes.
Yeah.
So that everything could be optimized,
Yeah.
refined, so that we could get more leverage and more out of it.
Yeah.
I get a clear sense that your intent is orbiting around something very different this time around.
That's right. Yeah.
So what is it that's at the
It's
core
your
of it this
friend.
time?
It's this gentleman that you met. I'm capable. I don't need to prove myself. I don't find the value in the leverage. And I know I say that, but there's still parts of my DNA that believe that still.
Right.
And so it's more so what he's doing. It's this integration of who I am and bringing it to my work, not just as, well, my practices and these things I'm interested in are very useful to me so that I can get through my work. It's actually, I want to offer it to the people that I'm working with. And it needs to be in its full expression. And if I do that, it compromises the integrity of its current model, is what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm getting at. So another remnant.
Right.
So that needs to be broken.
And if I may say, engaging with this company is so incredible because of how different they are. Like we're going to go to the museum for the dinner this evening for
Right.
the event. I've never seen that happening. But whenever they're in a primary city where there's a great museum, he will try and host the meal there
Cool.
so that people can go and explore the museum.
Cool.
Usually the whole weekend is jam-packed with meetings. No. Yesterday there was meetings until midday. Then the afternoon was about, you could choose to go kayaking or painting
Cool.
or for a hike.
That's great.
And there's something there, which is, there's a recognition that he has of what humans really need and want and how he sees it. And that's allowed to be brought into,
Yeah.
and the things that matter to him, that's allowed to be brought into these engagements and how people come together.
Right.
And then you feel that quality and that essence that's there.
Right.
And it becomes something that becomes very unique and very valuable.
Yeah. See, he's the kind of character that if he were to enter into my orbit a couple of years ago, I would say, haven't you seen that there's a way to fix this in a way where you're doing too much work? You could do less and make more, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, blah. But he understands the quality of life that he has and that he wants to go, not even just improve the quality of his life, but bring his full self to his work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I do long for that more and more with my work. But I think even more I long for that more and more with the people inside my work. I really want to see it in them, So I guess I need to model it.
Yeah, which you have been.
Yeah,
Yeah, you've definitely been making changes of late, which have been reflecting that.
I feel like it's only been 5%. I feel like it needs to really keep going.
Yeah, the overcompensation.
The Derek Sivers thing, yeah.
Yeah,
I feel terrible that I've kept you from your dinner. Do you want to wrap this up?
I think so. But this has been a great chat.
I'll drive you down in the golf cart.
Cool.
Is it worth plugging things like people can find you on hahara.co?
Yeah, Dara.co.
.co?
Yeah,
Alright, well, there you go.
HARA.co.
And find out everything you're doing there.
Yeah,
Cool.
and McAndrew.co as well.
Yes. Oh, the two digital personas
Yeah,
that we need to live into.
that's where they exist.
I've got a very similar thing I'm doing too.
College.com.
And then I need to make a website for myself, I guess, too.
Yeah, this has been good.
It's been great. My wife's also like, can I come home? Yes, I'll drive you there.